Chapter 2176. Doubt for this child who had just experienced an unimaginable event had no value in continuing. At least the current situation didn't allow it. He quickly brought his little sister back into Karo's cockpit. A single energy crystal dug out from the deep crater was enough to fully power Karo's. But before leaving, he quickly dug out a dozen more, just in case. Hold on tight. He looked at his little sister in his arms and softly said. The fifth war armor shot up to the sky. Attack! In just a short period of time, the massive Wraith army had been completely wiped out by the Wraith Emperor's power. At this time, the human resistance only had one target left to attack. The Wraith Emperor Cass. The warship's main cannons have been fully activated, aimed and fired. The fighter jets and tanks continued to advance, their target clear. But at this time, the Wraith Emperor's entire body was wrapped inside a giant black egg. The humans' attacks were unable to break through this giant black egg. The temple giant who had stood up once again used his remaining arm to smash this giant black egg into the ground. The temple giant seemed to have gone berserk as he continued to smash the egg. Finally, a crack appeared on the black eggshell. A jet black light shot out from the eggshell, rolling up the turbulent clouds and instantly releasing endless lightning. The sea was surging, the mountain was shaking, the volcano was erupting, the ground began to crack. The black eggshell had completely shattered. The Wraith Emperor once again appeared in everyone's sight. He was still wearing a sealed armor, but on the armor were countless roaring wraiths. The mask on the armor was a dark red wraith's face. Compared to before, the Wraith Emperor's body had grown a lot bigger and was now comparable to the Dawn armor. Compared to the Temple Giant, he was still as small as a newborn sparrow. Even so, the Wraith Emperor was still able to easily receive the Temple Giant's meteor-like fist with his bare hands. After easily receiving the Temple Giant's fist, the Wraith Emperor calmly said, I don't know whether or not you are a power left behind by the humans of the previous era, but this is not enough. It's not like I haven't destroyed the temple before. After saying that, the evil Ghost Emperor threw a punch at the Divine Temple's fist. At this moment, the giant's heaven-reaching pillar-like arms were exploding apart, section by section. The Temple Giant even had no choice but to fall back in a sorry state. With each step it took on the ground, the earth quaked and the mountains swayed. This is the true power of the Wraith Emperor. It's exactly the same. The Qingtian leader stared blankly at the world that was about to shatter. Such a scene had been depicted in the murals in the depths of the temple, calling the battleship, requesting energy replenishment. In the cockpit of Algot, the big sister Gamma, one of the four people, looked a little anxious. However, what made her even more anxious was that the battleship could no longer supply the Dawn armor. With energy, the resources had been exhausted. Under the rule of the Wraith Kingdom, the humans who were unwilling to be enslaved had no choice but to hide in a corner. Their resources were already extremely limited in the first place. In this battle of life or death, the humans had already brought all the resources they could. Even so, after this battle, the consumption of resources was like a bottomless pit. There was no way they could last until the end. The powerful Dawn armor could no longer support it, and its movements were slow, to the point that it had to fall to the ground. Catch! A bright red flash shot straight at this moment. Big Sister Gamma subconsciously caught it and looked down. It was an ostrich egg-sized oval red crystal. At the same time, a similar flash shot towards the front of Kaliana and the other two's armor. At the same time, a childish face appeared on the screen in the Four Sisters' cockpit. The little pilot of the 5th General. This is... Kaliana couldn't help but open her mouth and subconsciously said, Child, didn't you already run away? Use it quickly. It can replenish the armor's energy. And Kauros, little Ya's brother, quickly said, What is this it can replenish so quickly, and the purity is far higher than the bases by a few levels? Big Sister Gamma exclaimed. Obviously, she had already taken the lead in using this red crystal. It's really... Kaliana couldn't help but widen her eyes, her face full of disbelief. Good boy, child. I wronged you just now. So you weren't running away, but looking for energy. I'm sorry. It seems that I can only let you drive my big car to atone for my sins. Little Ya's brother was silent and frowned. What is driving a big car? Kalyana looked at the armor's soaring energy, licked her lips, and said, You want to know? If you want to know, I'll slowly teach you later. Now wait for this big sister to have fun with the Wraith Emperor first. After saying that, the third armor, Althea, instantly raised the huge electromagnetic cannon and released it at full power without saying anything. With the energy supply of the red crystal, she seemed to be able to fire a lot of these cannon shots. Bang! The electromagnetic cannon shot directly hit the Wraith Emperor's body and actually moved it. At the same time, the other three armor that had been replenished also attacked the Wraith Emperor together. The armor speed seemed to have increased by a lot. Hero's Crystal. The Wraith Emperor lightly snorted. I didn't think that you would be able to find these things, but these are just crystals formed by a trace of Hero's power. Far from enough. In an instant, the Dawn armor that seemed to have gained the upper hand was easily suppressed again. The four sisters immediately fell into a difficult and bitter battle. The newly replenished energy was also rapidly decreasing. Kairos did not do anything. He only focused his attention on the Wraith Emperor's every move. Brother, we've given the energy. Are we not leaving? We can't leave. The outside world is already like this. It's the same no matter where we go. Brother shook his head. If we can't defeat the Wraith Emperor here, even if we can leave now, it would be meaningless. Brother, do you want to defeat it? Of course. Only by doing so can we live the life we want. Brother said without thinking, this guy seems to care a lot about the Wraith mask on its face. Could that be its weakness? Then, Lilia can help brother. What? His eyes never left the Wraith Emperor. But at this moment, due to the difference in their gazes, he had no choice but to lower his head to look at his little sister, until he was certain that his little sister was not joking. I can do it. After saying that, his little sister's gaze gradually changed. It was very similar to when Lilia entered her listener state. But the difference was, this time, Lilia seemed to be able to maintain her consciousness. I can do it, Lilia said again. Then, she pressed both her hands on the control panel of the cockpit. At the same time, the system wizard of a blue flying bird flashed on the screen. The bird spread its wings and projected a virtual keyboard. Little Ya's hands moved across the virtual keyboard at an unimaginable speed. Where did you learn to operate these things? Brother subconsciously asked. I don't know. I just know how. Little Ya did not turn her head. Instead, her hands moved even faster. They seemed to have come out of my head on their own. All right, the lock seems to have been unlocked. Lock. Little Ya pointed at the screen. Surprisingly, the blueprints of the 4 war armors appeared on the screen. That's right, brother. You can use them now. Use them to your heart's content. Little Ya's brother opened his mouth. However, he still subconsciously pressed the button. Perhaps it was because Kalyana was the first war armor pilot to appear before him. The war armor he pressed was the 3rd war armor, Althea. On the battlefield, the human warship was rapidly falling. Before it fell, the 2 beams of light shot out from the malevolent Ghost Emperor's eyes destroyed the warship. The fall of the warship caused Meshi's Kurlit to pause for a moment. This pause was clearly fatal. In an instant, Kurlit's head was pinched by the malevolent Ghost Emperor, crushed. Kurlit fell to the ground. Meshi, big sister Gamma, cried out in grief. Her bloodshot eyes stared intently at the malevolent Ghost Emperor. Argot raised her spear in charge of the malevolent Ghost Emperor without regard for her life. The malevolent Ghost Emperor waved his hand. The black greatsword that had been destroyed by Metatron's feather sword appeared once more. With a swing of the black greatsword, it cut Argot's spear in half. It even left a large wound on Argot's body. The cockpit was broken open and Big Sister Gamma was instantly exposed to the air. Tom seemed to be slowing down. Gamma looked at the black greatsword that was slashing at her once more. She stubbornly stared at the impending death. Big Sister, Kalyana cried out in shock. Her face turned pale. So, in her moment of despair, she suddenly heard an ear-piercing sound of something breaking through the air. By the time Kalyana reacted, the malevolent ghost emperor had already been knocked aside by something. Fifth war armor, Kairos. 6 wings of light flashed. Beside Kairos, specks of bright starlight were constantly emitting from it. At this time, Argot's arm was grabbed by Kairos and lifted into the air. Inside the cockpit, Gamma's face was filled with a complicated expression of having survived a calamity. "Are you all right?" Big Brother quickly asked. No. Gamma subconsciously shook her head. Soon after, she said, "Not yet. Thank you." Probably because it was very difficult to say words of thanks to a child, this usually calm and mature big sister was somewhat unable to adapt. However, the malevolent ghost emperor was still here. The crisis had not been completely resolved. However, the malevolent ghost emperor did not counterattack. Instead, he casually lowered his black greatsword. "You appeared again. Why didn't you run away? Have you finally thought it through? Submitting to me is the only correct choice for you." "All right, I will submit to you." Littleya, Big Brother, suddenly nodded. The malevolent ghost emperor was so stunned that he seemed to be unable to react. The 4 sisters actually opened their eyes wide in disbelief. "Ha ha!" The malevolent ghost emperor suddenly burst out in laughter. "I did not miss here. Brat, do you know the consequences of lying?" At this moment, Kairos suddenly tossed Argonaut aside. Then, with a flash of his wings of light, he actually charged towards Althea, that Kalyana was piloting. In the instant that Kalyana was unable to react, Kairos, his palm directly pierced through Althea's body. "Child youth." Althea trembled a few times and then stopped in an instant. Kairos directly carried the destroyed Althea and slowly flew towards the malevolent ghost emperor. In the end, he lifted Althea up. Littleya, Big Brother, calmly said, "What else do you want me to do now? Child, you really—" Within Althea's cockpit, there was a patch of dark red. Kalyana was madly hitting the control ball. She was incomparably shocked and furious. "You detestable brat. You actually want to betray humanity." "Ha ha ha!" The malevolent ghost emperor once again laughed loudly and mockingly. The successor of the hero's power. Actually, the times have indeed changed. The fearless hero is no longer here. In the end, humanity has degenerated into selfish and lowly vile fellows. Good. I've said it before, as long as you pledge allegiance to me, you will become the malevolent ghost prince. From today onwards, I will give you half of this world. No need. I only want to live a stable life. Littleya, Big Brother, shook his head. You can rule your world. Just leave me a home. Truly a simple and lowly wish. The malevolent ghost emperor lightly laughed. In that case, hand over your secret crystal as well. At this moment, Kairos' cockpit opened without even thinking. Within the open cockpit on the control panel, a sparkling crystal was slowly rising. At this moment, Littleya, Big Brother, directly sat down on the pilot's seat. His hands were hanging by his side, and he even closed his eyes. He had completely given up on operating the cockpit. At this moment, Kalyana had already given up on cursing. Her eyes were lifeless as she watched all of this happen. She was practically paralyzed within the cockpit. Perhaps she should not have that much hope for a child at all. "I'll fulfill your wish." The malevolent ghost emperor's voice contained a trace of joy. As if he could not wait any longer, he directly extended his hand, wanting to dig out Kairos' secret crystal. He was about to touch Kairos' core. The radiance of the core crystal was reflected before the malevolent ghost emperor, like the most precious secret treasure in the world. It was so enchanting. At this moment, an extreme flash of light appeared before the malevolent ghost emperor. It was a flash of light that directly cut through the middle of his body. At some unknown point in time, the little youngster within the cockpit had opened his eyes. A sword had appeared in Kairos' hand. A large sword transformed from the war equipment, Althea. At this moment, the large sword was already pointing towards the sky. A perfectly straight crack appeared on the malevolent ghost emperor's body. Starting from his head, it continued down to his lower body. Terrifying black energy was currently gushing out from the cracks on the malevolent Ghost Emperor's body. At this moment, everyone could already hear the miserable howls of the malevolent Ghost Emperor. In the air, the malevolent Ghost Emperor used both his hands to cover his face, frantically twisting his huge body, but he was still unable to stop the black energy from gushing out from his body. Following the gushing of the black energy, the malevolent Ghost Emperor's huge body was also continuously shrinking. Just now, what happened? Within Althea's cockpit, Kaliana looked at the scene before her in disbelief. On the screen of the cockpit, only the words sword armor mode appeared. She never knew that Althea could turn into a sword, and this sword was currently being held by Kauros. Brat child, you were lying just now? For this final attack? Kaliana immediately cried out in shock, her bright eyes continuously sizing up the little youngster on the screen. Why didn't you say so earlier? Moreover, was there a need to make it so real? Little Ya's big brother expressionlessly said, the truth and falsehood that make up a lie. Often, a lie with truth is easier to confuse others. I don't know which bastard taught you that. Damn it. Kaliana was startled, then immediately clenched her teeth and said, if you couldn't deceive the malevolent Ghost Emperor just now, you wouldn't have wanted to kill me, right? Little Ya's big brother was silent for a moment, then slowly nodded and said very seriously, if I have to. Kaliana was so angry that she said, no, the door is welded shut. I won't let you get in. Little Ya's big brother looked at her expressionlessly, then suddenly turned the control ball, causing Kauros to instantly retreat several dozen meters away. At some unknown time, the malevolent Ghost Emperor had already stopped that painful writhing, instead becoming calm. At this time, it had already shrunk to the size of a normal person, or even it had become thinner and smaller. This guy, he can actually still hold on. Kaliana's eyes trembled. At this time, the malevolent Ghost Emperor's helmet completely shattered. After that, a pale and bloodless human face appeared before everyone's eyes. Following the shattering of the mask, the armor on the malevolent Ghost Emperor's body also shattered inch by inch. In the end, what appeared from the shattered armor was surprisingly a silver-haired youngster. On the youngster's forehead, there was also an Omega imprint. The instant the silver-haired youngster appeared, Little Ya's big brother instantly raised Althea's sword, his whole body becoming alert. However, this silver-haired youngster did not seem to have any intention of making a move. Instead, he silently sized up the situation before him. Feeling this silver-haired youngster's gaze, Little Ya's big brother even had a feeling that this youngster had directly seen through the cockpit and was looking at him. Congratulations on passing. Although the process is somewhat different, the silver-haired youngster smiled faintly at this time. I also had a lot of fun this time. What exactly are you doing? Little Ya's big brother frowned slightly. The silver-haired youngster shook his head. You don't need to know. It's enough for him to know. After saying that, the silver-haired youngster suddenly looked up at the sky, a thought-provoking smile appearing on his face. Am I right, Imperial brother? Who are you talking to? Little Ya's big brother asked with a deep voice. At this time, the silver-haired youngster waved his hand, and a golden page appeared on his palm. The silver-haired youngster blinked his eyes, held the golden page in his hand between his fingers, waved it, and said with a light smile, after working so hard for so long, the reward for passing this stage should be out, but this is not for you. Little Ya's big brother immediately felt that this silver-haired youngster's nature contained a trace of viciousness. At this moment, the silver-haired youngster waved the golden page in his hand and threw it at a certain place in the park that had long since been destroyed. The instant the golden page was thrown, the silver-haired youngster's body suddenly flashed, and in the next instant, he appeared in Kauros' cockpit. He extended his hand to cup Little Ya's big brother's cheek. At this moment, Little Ya's big brother was actually unable to move his body. I caught you. What? While Little Ya's big brother was stunned, the silver-haired youngster's body turned into a ray of starlight and instantly disappeared. Caught you. A voice suddenly came from behind. The woman in the ice-blue robe frowned and slowly turned around without batting an eyelid. That was no longer the radiance of the holy light, so she did not have the feeling of being burned. Even so, the dim radiance vaguely brought about a sense of destruction, which made her secretly fearful. Metatron, the woman called out softly, I didn't expect. I'm afraid that even the group of seraphs in the palace of blazing heaven and all the saints in the kingdom of heaven did not expect you to still be alive. Then I have to thank the person who developed the holy light system, Metatron said calmly. As he spoke, he walked towards the woman in the ice-blue robe. Of course, that's not important. The woman snorted coldly. You don't have a holy body, and your strength is only so little. But this is my home ground. Metatron, I can let you holy fall a second time. The six-winged youngster said indifferently, so the first holy fall was also caused by you, right? Let this answer remain in the depths of the fog forever. The woman in the ice-blue robe sneered, and at the same time, she raised the Book of Gaia in her hand. Let this page world be sealed forever, never to be opened again. Disappear, Metatron. Metatron did not waste any time. He waved his arm, and gray feathers quickly gathered in front of his hand, turning into a new slender feather sword. It was about to be triggered. However, it was at this moment that a golden light appeared between them. What appeared was shockingly a golden page of a book. The moment the golden page appeared, the woman in the ice-blue robe's pupils contracted. She decisively gave up on attacking, and without another word, she grabbed at the golden page. Seeing this, Metatron chuckled and directly lifted the feather sword and stepped forward. I like people who spoil things the most, especially people like you who are hated by everyone. You, seeing that the feather sword was coming for her head, the woman had no choice but to hurriedly raise the Book of Gaia to block it. But at this moment of emptiness, a fog suddenly rolled, and the page was swept away. It's you again. The woman in the ice-blue robe instantly screamed in anger. It's that damn Yulia again. It's her again. Once again, he snatched the pages from his hands. The woman was so angry that she almost forgot about the existence of Metatron. She instinctively drove the Book of Gaia, wanting to return all the pages. But at this moment, a gray flash flickered. In an instant, the Book of Gaia was split into two. The woman was dazed for a moment, and she saw that the six-winged youngster's hand had already grabbed half of the Book of Gaia and taken it away. How is this possible? The woman looked at the six-winged youngster in shock. At this moment, Metatron said indifferently, nothing is impossible. After all, I'm using my soul to slash it, so it should at least give me some face. With that, Metatron once again waved the sword of feather and went straight for the woman's heart. This sword was a collision of souls, great, supreme, as vast as the starry sky. In the face of this spiritual aura, the woman trembled all over. She could not face the Metatron at this moment. She screamed in shock and quickly retreated. The remaining half of the Book of Gaia opened up once again. The moment the sword of feather was about to pierce her, she had already disappeared from the world of this page without even saying a word. She's pretty good at leaving. No wonder she could cause so much trouble in the Holy Light Kingdom. Metatron shook his head, and the sword of feather instantly shattered in his hand. He lowered his head and looked thoughtfully at the half of the Book of Gaia in his hand. Suddenly, Metatron's eyes focused, and he looked in a certain direction beside him. Didn't anyone tell you that peeping is not the behavior of a good child? In the air, the mist gathered little by little and condensed into Yulia's appearance. At this time, Yulia was holding the golden page tightly, but she looked at Metatron with a curious gaze. She was ready to run at any time. You're Black Soul, right? Metatron suddenly said. Yulia asked calmly, what's Black Soul? But her heart was not calm. How do you know? Metatron chuckled. Have you heard of the 11 beginnings? Yulia blinked. She really hadn't heard of it. Metatron suddenly spat out a mouthful of viscous blood and then fell straight to the ground. "Hello." Yulia, his eyes widened. "Listen to me," Metatron warned. "Don't imitate me and self-destruct your soul." After that, the six-winged young man became motionless. Dead. He wasn't completely dead, but it seemed like he wouldn't wake up for a while. Yulia glanced at the six-winged young man. At this time, she was in a cave. She casually broke some dead branches on the road and made a small fire. Seeing that the six-winged young man didn't wake up for a while, Yulia took out the newly seized page. She already had the experience of studying a book page once. Right now, her gaze was focused on the book page, waiting for the words to appear. And the strange words on the book page, which could be directly understood by people, began to appear as expected. Eternal calendar, the 9th day of the month of Gemini, cloudy. Today my brother, Huang, and I sneaked into the 4th royal ruin to play hide-and-seek. It was so exciting. We were almost discovered by Gamma and the others. I'm so angry. They are my maids, but they don't listen to me at all. I have to think of a way to catch the 4 of them. I'll punish them to do volunteer work for the Royal Welfare Institute for 10 days. They think I don't know. They all want to be my brother's crown princess, behind my back. I clearly see them as good sisters, but they all want to be my sisters-in-law. So hateful. However, something strange happened today. I forgot something that happened in the ruins. I asked my brother, but he didn't tell me. He said it's fine as long as I'm fine. I seem to have heard a strange sound, but I can't remember. Forget it. If my brother says I'm fine, then I'm fine. But there's one more thing that pisses me off. That is Huang actually broke the limited edition platinum cas that I painstakingly drew. Huang is a big bad guy. I hate him the most. Fortunately, my brother fixed the cas for me. Today is also the day I like my brother the most. Chapter 2177. The 2 golden pages floated in front of Senior Yulia. After neatly folding them, she quickly placed them in her bosom. Then, she thoughtfully looked at the 6-winged youth Medellin. At this time, half of the Book of Gaia was still in Medellin's hand. Moreover, his grip was very tight. Senior Yulia had already tried to pry open Medellin,'s hand, but she was unable to pull out the Book of Gaia's hand. She didn't know if this guy was really unconscious or just pretending. In any case, she was also a master of performance. Yet, she couldn't tell. How about I try again and see if I can steal the other half of the Book of Gaia first? She didn't hesitate to do it. However, just as Senior Yulia extended her evil hand toward the unconscious handsome youth, Medellin woke up. He opened his eyes in an instant and sat up like a spring. Senior Yulia was startled. Her face was filled with bewilderment. "You're fine. What can happen to me?" The 6-winged angel youth asked in confusion. Senior Yulia said, "But didn't you almost self-detonate your soul just now?" "Oh, you're talking about that." Medellin shrugged and said, "Don't worry. It wasn't my soul that exploded. I don't have a soul." "It wasn't your soul." Senior Yulia seemed to have heard something inconceivable. "You don't have a soul? We're people who travel the world. It's normal for us to carry a few souls with us for emergencies, right?" Medellin said solemnly. "As everyone knows, I'm someone who engages in multi-level marketing. Therefore, it's normal for me to carry a few souls with me for mystifying things." Huh. She didn't believe him for the time being. She didn't dare to say anything. But the 6-winged angel boy finally woke up. Senpai, Yulia, could also properly ask him about the meaning behind his words before he fainted. "What does the 11th beginning refer to?" Yulia frowned. Metatron thought for a moment and said, "It's an unfortunate guy. He doesn't have a name, only a code name. I picked this guy up on a battlefield somewhere in the void. When I picked it up, it was already on the verge of death." "And then?" Yulia frowned. Metatron said, "Burp, this guy spouted a lot of nonsense before. I didn't remember much of it. I only remember this guy telling me to be careful of Black Soul, and that's it." Yulia blinked, then pointed at herself and said, "Don't I look very pure?" "Pure?" Medellin rubbed his chin. Her figure is indeed not bad, right?" I think so too. Yulia puffed up her chest and laughed a few times. Then she patted Medellin his chest vigorously and said with a smile, "Actually, you yourself are this so-called 11th beginning, right?" "Ah, you actually found out just like that? You are really smart." Medellin also laughed, but he felt that this woman's chest was probably not easy to pat, so he gave up. Yulia suddenly narrowed her eyes, and a murderous intent appeared in her eyes. She directly grabbed Medellin his throat and said expressionlessly, "After saying so much, you still haven't explained. How did you know my identity?" Medellin said unhurriedly, "Didn't your master tell you that the most powerful black souls will be crowned with the name of beginning?" Yulia's heart skipped a beat. Indeed, no one had told her this. "Just because you said you are." She directly sneered and said, "You said you were one of the most powerful black soul envoys, but why don't you have any black soul aura on you? You are even the seraph of the kingdom of heaven." Medellin said indifferently, "You are new, right? Don't you know that when black souls are on vacation, they can completely change into another identity? In essence, change." "Are you really?" Senior sister, Yulia, immediately frowned, but at this time, her hands had loosened a lot. Just based on the fact that this person could say that black souls were on vacation, she already believed most of it. This kind of thing probably wouldn't spread outside the shop. "So you are?" "My original body isn't here." Medellin shrugged and said, "I only entered the Book of Gaia with a part of my consciousness attached to Celion. But you, how did you appear in the kingdom of holy light?" Yulia still had a trace of vigilance. Medellin said, "Kingdom of Heaven is such a big financial backer, and they have to pay a huge price for renting Kingdom of Heaven every once in a while. How can they not send someone to keep an eye on it? For example, if it were you, as a senior of the head office, you would also send 1 or 2 inspectors to the subsidiary company, right? Kingdom of Heaven, financial backer. Renting?" Yulia couldn't help but frown. What does this mean?" Medellin said in surprise, "Don't you know? The entire Kingdom of Heaven is rented from your master." "I don't know. No one told me this kind of thing." "What was Kingdom of Heaven?" The Kingdom of Heaven was one of the few supergiants in the dimensional void. It represented the angel core of the holy light. It could be said that it had conquered thousands of worlds. As a hard-working seeder, it would often have conflicts with other giants. Every time there was a conflict between giants, it would bring a shock to the environment of the entire void dimension. But such a giant of the void dimension actually rented its base camp? F***CK. In this case, isn't the boss the landlord of Kingdom of Heaven? All along, she knew that the boss was a very powerful guy, an indescribable existence in the void dimension, and the shop was more like a fantasy creature, but she didn't know that her boss could actually be the landlord of Kingdom of Heaven. I'm rich. This time, I'm really rich. I'm going to have a meteoric rise." That, Senior 11? Yulia already believed most of Medellin. His words, after all, such a secret. If one wasn't related, how could he know so clearly? "Call me Medanzo." Medellin, Medanzo said indifferently, "I haven't officially returned yet, and my vacation isn't over yet. Don't talk nonsense about me waking up early." I understand. Yulia quickly nodded and immediately said, "By the way, Senior, I saw you fight with the guy who pretended to be Huang. You seem to know the background of the other party?" At this time, Medanzo flipped through the half of the Book of Gaia in her hand and said casually, "That guy is called Morrigan. He's a god with multiple divine titles from a divine system called the Celtic gods. After the Celtic gods were destroyed by Kingdom of Heaven, the gods of the divine system were thrown into the Holy Light Kingdom, intending to use them to cultivate high-quality petitioners. As expected of the Void Dimension giant, Kingdom of Heaven is really generous." Yulia immediately gave a thumbs up. They actually thought of distorting the beliefs of the true gods, but how did it become like this? Medanzo said, "Obviously, there must have been some mistake in the transformation of these true gods, causing the original consciousness of Morgan to awaken in the Holy Light Kingdom, which ultimately led to the holy fall of the saint of the City of Freedom this time, and our falling into the world of the Book of Gaia. I'm afraid this is Morrigan's revenge against Kingdom of Heaven. Then, Senior 11, do you know what the mistake was? Senior Sister, Yulia, quickly asked. Also, other than Morrigan, did the other true gods of the Celtic pantheon also awaken in the Holy Light Kingdom? This is something I need to investigate. Madanzo's expression suddenly froze. Newcomer. Oh, I'm here. I'm here. I need you now to assist me in investigating the truth of this Morrigan incident, Madanzo said seriously. Of course, I won't let you work for nothing. After this matter is over, I will propose a reward for you. Are you willing to accept this task? Of course I'm willing. She quickly agreed, but soon hesitated. But Senior 11, Morrigan has been driven away by you. I'm afraid we won't be able to find her so easily. Isn't this book here? At this time, Metatro raised the half of the Book of Gaia in his hand and said with a chuckle, although there's only half of it left, even an ordinary void divine tool is not as good as 1/10 of it. Yulia suddenly had an idea. We can use this half to sense the location of the other half. That's right. Madanzo nodded. But before we act, I have to deal with the matters here. It was a scene of devastation, and the earth was shattered. Dawn had just arrived. On the battlefield, the human resistance army leaned against each other, exhausted. Before they could enjoy this final victory, they had already fallen asleep. Everything seemed to be forever fixed like this. It was like a painting. The whole world has stopped. Yulia stood on a high slope and looked at the battlefield, exclaiming in surprise. Stories always have an end. When there's an ending, there's naturally no more. Madanzo said indifferently. In this story, the humans defeated the evil spirits, and that was the ending. Yulia pondered. So, every page world deduced by the Book of Gaia is actually not complete, far from being as powerful as imagined. Is it because the pages are missing that the functions are incomplete? Senior 11, did I say something wrong? Madanzo blinked and said, You seem to have done a lot of research on divine void artifacts. Yulia said modestly, When I was walking the void, I did a little research. At this time, Madanzo took out half of the Book of Gaia. Kerrigan can't be locked on for now, probably because this book was split into two, so the function loss is even more serious. However, I did find another page world with information about the people who were swallowed by the Book of Gaia. I have a page here, and it has the ability to travel through multiple page worlds. Senior apprentice sister, Yulia, hurriedly took out the unique book page that she obtained from the Crayon Kingdom. As for the book page that I obtained from this Wraith realm, I haven't discovered anything special about it yet. Then let's go to this page world first. Madanzo thought for a bit and said, No matter what, Kerrigan will definitely take back this half of the Book of Gaia in my hands. We don't have to specifically look for her and wait for her to come find us. Take her with us. We'll go now. As Metatro spoke, he turned to look at a young lady who was leaning against a rock and seemed to be asleep. Selen. When he said he had something to take care of, it was actually to bring Selen back from the ruins of the industrial park. The 11th beginning? In the open kitchen connected to the living room, Boss Luo, who was doing something casually, tilted his head. He glanced at the TV with the corner of his eyes, then ignored it and continued cutting the vegetables. But there wasn't only Boss Luo here. There was another person standing here, a silver-haired young man. However, this silver-haired young man's eyes were currently lifeless as he stood there without moving. After Boss Luo finished cutting the vegetables, he carried the ingredients to the stove. His body directly passed through the silver-haired young man's body. This silver-haired young man was actually an illusion without a physical body. Not only did he not have a physical body, he didn't even have a consciousness. When Boss Luo brought the silver-haired young man from the Wraith realm, what he obtained was only an illusion like this. The altar could be used to restore the original form of this illusion, but the cost was not worth it, because there was a power that originated from the Omega mark on the silver-haired young man's forehead, the power of the eternal royal family, a power that could even kill an origin executor. Luocio himself also had a similar power, but this power was unable to restore the silver-haired young man's illusion. I don't have a very strong desire to find out about my origins, Boss Luo muttered to himself. But it seems that it's always hoping to come to me. Then, it's my turn to catch you this time. If this is only a game, the silver-haired young man's illusion slowly faded away until it finally disappeared into the thin morning fog. A soft sound. It was the sound of a door opening. From a slightly open door, the young girl cautiously poked her head out to meet Boss Luo's gaze. The young girl seemed to be panicking. You were the one who carried me into the room last night. What happened last night? Why don't I remember anything? Boss Luo casually replied. You fell asleep while watching TV, so I brought you into the room. The young girl pursed her lips, thought of something, then closed the door. But soon enough, the young girl came out again, this time wearing a light blue dress. She came to the kitchen, leaned against the cupboard, propped her chin on her hand as she watched her brother cook, then curiously asked, What is this? Stir-fried vegetables, Boss Luo casually smiled. The snacks I ate last night were too oily, so I'll make breakfast a bit lighter, / it wouldn't be a bad idea to continue like this. The young girl simply watched. Chapter 2178. It was the sound of metal clashing against concrete. In the dark underground tunnels, the travelers were carefully moving forward in search of resources. In the ruined city, the gray snow still hadn't stopped, and the cold had already invaded the huge underground space under the city. They were now moving along a track. Mr. Katz, as the Iron Man, was at the front of the group, scouting the way. Remia followed beside. Her hands were hugging a longsword. After she and her companions fell into the black mud and came to this terrible city, they found this sword in a shop that looked like a handicraft shop. In fact, it had never been sharpened, but it was strong enough. You have been traveling for so long. Did you meet any other humans? This was a question that Remia had always wanted to ask. Perhaps because they were about to enter an unknown and dangerous place. If she did not ask some questions now, she might not have the chance to. Yes, quite a few, she replied with a smile. Then where are they now? Remia couldn't help but ask. Those humans might be the others at the Holy Maiden's ceremony. They are all living underground. He thought for a moment and said, in a tomb. Remia was stunned and said angrily, Those are called corpses. Yes, Taramaru said the same thing. Z nodded. They are humans who have become corpses. Remia sighed. How should she explain? After interacting with Z for a while, she realized that Z had many different views than her. Look, the space here has become bigger. Mr. Kaz, who was scouting the way ahead, said. The group of travelers hurriedly stepped forward. At this time, Katz was standing in front of them with an old oil lamp in his hand. It was indeed a very spacious space. This place is much bigger than the place where we hid. This seems to be called a train station. Look, there are stairs. They even found a train whose outer shell was rusted. Remia curiously approached the train and reached out to wipe the dust off the train's window. In an instant, a withered face appeared in front of Remia. Remia jumped in fright and retreated, knocking into Z's arms. Z placed her hands on Remia's shoulders. There are humans in there too. It's a corpse, Remia said with lingering fear. It's well preserved inside. We should be able to find something. Z had no intention of refuting. Instead, he carried the oil lamp and walked to the door of a carriage. He tried to open the door of the carriage. Perhaps it was because it was already corroded, but the door of the carriage actually didn't open. When it was pushed open, it even made an ear-piercing sound of friction. Found the treasure. Iron Armor Man, Kaz cried out in surprise. But because of its size, it couldn't enter the train at all. It was the same for Taramaru. Even if such a huge toad managed to squeeze into the train, it would probably get stuck and wouldn't be able to move. Only Mr. Chintian and the little bluebird were able to enter. Of course, Remia was there as well. She hesitated for a while before finally entering. When they entered, Remia tried to pull the door of the train, but realized that the door wouldn't open no matter how hard she tried. It was completely rusted and stuck, but Z pushed it open easily. What great strength! They must have discovered a train that was exhausted to death before. After entering, Remia watched as Z and the others opened the luggage compartments in the train and searched for useful supplies. Remia, on the other hand, walked carefully in the carriage. Perhaps because the train was a completely enclosed space, even though there were dried corpses everywhere, there were no signs of damage. The corpses were perfectly preserved. This meant that at least the inside of the train hadn't been attacked by the terrifying magic beasts outside. Why are all the passengers sitting in their seats? Remia asked curiously. On the seats of the carriage, there were dried corpses of men and women, old and young. They were all sitting in their original seats. Even their seat belts weren't unbuckled. Facing such a strange and terrifying scene, a young girl like her should have been scared stiff. But after coming to this dangerous world, she had even killed magic beasts. Worse things had happened. Even though she was a little flustered, it wasn't useless. Isn't that simple? The little blue bird landed on Remia's shoulder. They were sitting on it when they died. That's true, Remia said hesitantly. But don't you think it's strange? How can people sit and wait for death? If they died at the same time, then it's possible. Mr. Qingtian spoke like a lecturer. Student Remia, do you have any other questions? What? Remia was shocked. What is it that made the people here die in an instant? Mr. Qingtian thought for a moment and said, these corpses don't look injured. Some of them were sitting when they died, so they should have died at the same time. To be able to do this, they probably inhaled something fatal. Look, this corpse keeps grabbing its own neck. Is this what you call suffering? Remia looked at the dried corpses that Mr. Qingtian pointed at. The mummy's hands were completely wrapped around its own neck, and its mouth was even in an open state, as if it had screamed before. But all of this had probably happened in a short period of time. Otherwise, there would have been signs of struggle on the seat. **T. Remia screamed and quickly covered her mouth and nose. Z smiled and said, don't worry. If there was poisonous gas, we would have inhaled it when we came in. There's nothing wrong now. If there really was poisonous gas, it would have dispersed long ago. The door of the train is closed, but many parts are damaged. It's not completely sealed. There's nothing useful in this carriage. Let's go to the carriage in front. The little blue bird flew from Remia's shoulder to Zesh's shoulder. Then I'll go to the carriage in the back. Let's split up, Mr. Qingtian said. Save time. Okay, Z agreed, looking at the front and the back. Remia subconsciously followed S footsteps. When she passed by a seat, she suddenly stopped. There seemed to be a family of 3 on the seat. The parents and their children were leaning on each other. When death came, they were probably just sleeping. There was no trace of pain on their faces. Remia silently put her hands together as if praying for something. But soon, she let go of her hands. Praying was useless. She had tried many times. But if it was just praying for the dead, even if there was no response from the saints, it was still possible. May you all rest in peace. What was that just now? In another carriage, Z suddenly looked at Remia with a hint of curiosity. Remia did not react immediately and showed a puzzled expression. Z imitated Remia's action and put his hands together. I'm talking about this because I've seen you do this several times. I've seen pictures of people doing this before, but I don't know what it means. This is praying, Remia said subconsciously, telling one's wish to God, praying to be able to avoid disaster and live happily. God, Z blinked and said, is this useful? Of course. Remia blurted out, but stopped. She shook her head and said hesitantly, actually, I don't know either. Praying, was it really useful? She really did not know. When she was still in the free city, she believed without a doubt, because every time she prayed, there would always be a response. She was a candidate for the Holy Maiden. Her prayers could produce a strong wish that was similar to the holy light. When the villagers saw her, they respected her very much. But now, she could not do anything. Even before her companion died, she could not warm her hands. She should not have any doubts about her faith. But now she couldn't do that. Remia suddenly felt scared. Perhaps this was a place abandoned by the saints. In this world, other than death, there's only death. In the entire world, perhaps only Z and a few others were still alive. She did not even know if Z and the others could still be considered humans. "Can I pray just like this?" Z asked again. He was eager to learn. He had always been like this. He was always curious about the unknown and new things. Remia suddenly felt irritated. She reached out and slapped his hand away. Remia gritted her teeth and said, "Don't pray. If you have time to pray, you might as well search for supplies. It's more practical." Okay. He wasn't angry. He nodded casually and started searching for useful supplies in the carriage. Remia opened her mouth. She regretted her actions just now. She wanted to say something, but she could not bring herself to say it. She bit her lips and searched around silently. But things did not go as smoothly as expected. They had already found the end of the train, but they didn't find anything useful, so they could only go back. "You don't seem disappointed at all?" Remia asked curiously. "We didn't find anything either," Ze said. "Most of the time, we didn't find anything useful. Get used to it." "I see." Remia nodded. She gritted her teeth and said softly, "Is it just now? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been angry with you." "Just now?" He looked confused. Remia stammered, Just when you wanted to pray, I think you're right." Z shook his head. "There's nothing wrong with stopping a wrong action. Since praying is useless, you stop me. It's logical. I can't say that it's wrong." Remia laughed bitterly. "I don't know how to explain it to you." Z smiled. "It's okay. You can tell me when you've thought it through. If she went to the Academy of Freedom, she would be very popular, right?" Such a thought flashed across Remia's mind. Thinking of this, she hurriedly took out something from her bosom. It was a book that looked completely yellow. "What's this?" "I found it on that family seat just now. I saw that you usually like to read, so I wanted to take it," Remia said with some apprehension. Z took the book from Remia happily and flipped through it. Little Prince? It was like a fairy tale book, and it even had illustrations. "I like the structure." "Thank you, Remia." "You're welcome." "Ah," she exclaimed softly. "What happened just now?" Remia's breathing quickened instantly. Z actually reached out and brushed the hair in front of her forehead away, and then kissed her forehead. The temperature of his cheeks was rising at a terrifying speed, and it had even reached the base of his ears. "WWW, what are you doing?" "Expressing my gratitude," Z said calmly. "I read some books before. It says that kissing is an act of gratitude." That's right. But I feel like something is wrong." Remia was momentarily at a loss for words. However, the lingering sensation on her forehead was... She thought for a while and said, "The book said that kissing has many meanings. For example, greetings, respect, and love." "Remia, if you have time, can you experience it with me? I've always wanted to know why kissing someone's lips represents love." Z reached out and gently stroked Remia's lips with his fingertips. The young girl quivered in an instant, and her mind went blank. "I don't want to." Suddenly, she instinctively pushed Z away as if she was frightened. After pushing Z away, the girl lowered her head and hurriedly ran to the exit carriage. Z leaned against the seat and blinked. He saw the little blue bird squatting on the back of the seat in front of him and looking at him. "Do you want me to try with you?" Thought about it seriously and shook his head. "I feel like you'll hurt me." "I don't want to. I found some canned food here. I don't know if it's edible." "Did you find anything, Remia?" Chin Tian came back from the second half of the train. When he walked to the exit carriage, he only saw Remia standing alone in front of the door. She didn't move at all. Remia heard the sound and turned around. She looked at Chin Tian and said hesitantly, "Cats and Taramaru seem to be missing." Outside the train, at least in the area visible to the naked eye, there was no trace of cats and toad Taramaru. End of chapter. Chapter 2179. Did they use the staircase to go up? They were standing in front of the staircase, discussing Kaz and Taramaru's disappearance. There was only the way they came, the other end of the train, and the staircase leading to the underground station. There was no reason for Kaz and Taramaru to go back the way they came. As for the other end of the train, they didn't know how long it would take to reach the next station. The most likely possibility was that Kaz and Taramaru had gone ahead to explore. Logically speaking, Even if they went ahead, they should have left behind some clues. Mr. Fairski was a little puzzled. They usually don't leave an explanation like this. Perhaps something happened? What do you think, Z? Let's go up and take a look. Z thought for a moment and said, we were going to go up anyway, but let's try not to split up. Remia looked at the broken escalator and felt a sense of uneasiness. That was because the underground platform was too quiet. The length of the corridor was unexpected, which meant that the platform was buried very deep. Regardless, the remaining members of the group and Remia were about to reach the end of the corridor. Look, there's light. The light at the end of the staircase was a little blinding. Remia was used to the dark environment and was only illuminated by fire and oil lamps. It was like seeing the sun that she hadn't seen for a long time. But the sky of the city was gray and gloomy, and the gray snow didn't stop falling. How could there be sunlight in this silent world? Mr. Qingtian was the first to walk out of the staircase, followed by Z and the little blue bird. Remia also walked out impatiently. She saw that Z and Qingtian were standing in front of her. They didn't move. What's wrong? Remia asked subconsciously. However, at this moment, everything was reflected in front of her eyes. Light, bright light, lights of various colors. People, and many people. Not only that, even the temperature here was pleasant. It was the kind of warmth that seemed like a distant memory. Am I in heaven? Remia looked at everything in front of her in a daze, her voice hoarse. Shops, pedestrians, the sound of music floating in the air, and a huge Christmas tree decorated with dazzling decorations. It was right in front of him. This was still the station, but it was more like a shopping mall. The ruined city covered with gray snow and the bustling shopping mall in the huge train station were like two completely different worlds. Z, do you see it? People, many, many people. Remia's voice trembled as she took a few steps forward. I see it. Z nodded. They're humans. Not human corpses, but Z. People. Many people. The girl was extremely excited. She even grabbed Z's hand. Look, look, there are people everywhere. There are people in this city. Z smiled faintly. He didn't seem to want to interrupt Remia's joy. Yes, I see it too. At this time, the young girl directly walked to the front. She looked at the shops on both sides and the pedestrians on the street. She walked and stopped as though she had discovered a new continent. Her face was filled with radiance, like the flashing neon lights on the street. Z and the rest quietly followed behind Remia, keeping her company until she finally stopped in front of the huge Christmas tree that was about to grow into the dome of the square. Remia clasped her hands together as though she was praying. Then Green Sky looked at her quietly. Suddenly, Remia took a deep breath and slowly opened her eyes. It feels like I've come back to life. Thank you for your hospitality. Remia, Mr. Fairski looked at me in confusion before looking at Remia and calling her name tentatively. Remia said faintly, I know. This place is strange, isn't it? It's cold and barren outside. How can it be so lively and warm here? It's just that I can't resist this warmth, even if it's fake. You noticed, Z said softly. Remia nodded. The people here don't seem to be able to see us. I clearly walked past them, but their eyes didn't linger on me. Z nodded and took out a stone from his backpack. He threw at a man and a woman who were walking hand in hand not far away. They should be a couple. The stone was thrown directly in front of the couple and bounced on the ground. However, the couple continued walking as if they didn't see it. Z thought for a moment and took out another item. It was a bottle. Instantly, Remia caught a whiff of a pungent smell similar to kerosene. She looked at the bottle in his hand and exclaimed, Isn't this too dangerous? This world is far more dangerous than you think. Z ignited the bottle in his hand and threw it. This time, he threw it at the couple who were holding hands. The moment the Molotov cocktail landed on the ground, it immediately exploded. A raging fire instantly engulfed this seemingly very loving couple. In an instant, an ear-piercing scream was heard for where the Molotov exploded. Remia's heart tightened. In the fire, the couple struggled in pain. They twisted and turned. After a while, something fell, but it wasn't the couple. After the fire, What fell to the ground seemed to be the roots of some kind of huge plant that had been burnt. What's this? Remia sucked in a breath of cold air. These two charred objects looked more like roasted ginseng. Looks like the people here are all like this. Z looked around and pulled open his shirt. At the waist of Z, there was a row of flammable grenades. Without wasting any time, Z picked up another Molotov cocktails and threw them out. Soon, there were more Molotov cocktails. That's two. Remia swallowed her saliva and looked a little frightened. This guy likes making Molotov cocktails ever since he accidentally learned how to make them. Mr. Chintian patted Remia's shoulder. Do you want to try? Oh. At this moment, Mr. Fairsky also pulled open his thick clothes. His belt was also filled with Molotov cocktails. He even took out one and stuffed it into Remia's hand. This isn't enough for me, because there's a lot of them. His body is empty and filled with Molotov cocktails. When you want to use them, you just have to open the steel plate on his chest. It's very convenient. So, all of you are a bunch of arsonists? Without waiting for Remia to react, Fairsky appeared and joined the ranks of the arsonists. With Z's help, the surroundings were quickly engulfed in flames. More and more people, or rather, more and more monsters, were burned to their original state by the fire. Ear-piercing screams filled the air. Remia felt her scalp go numb. The flames destroyed everything. Before Remia's eyes, an entire civilization seemed to have been destroyed by the flames. Dreamy lights, lively pedestrians. The huge shopping plaza at the train station turned gray in an instant and was soon dyed with the color of fire. This place was no longer bustling with noise and excitement. It had become as desolate and dilapidated as the outside. Thick vines crawled all over the walls and floor, as if they were veins of some kind. The end of all these veins was the huge Christmas tree in the middle of the plaza. It no longer carried the beautiful wishes of the people for the holidays. Instead, it carried a large amount of despair and death. Remia felt suffocated. Under the Christmas tree, there were piles of white bones. Finally, it's revealed its true form. A tree demon. Mr. Chintian narrowed his eyes. Look, it's Kaz and Taramaru. Under the Christmas tree, Kaz and Taramaru seemed to have fainted. They lay motionless on top of the white bones. At this moment, the Christmas tree suddenly waved its branches and slapped at them. It's really not bad. It's worth pretending to be. After all, it can save books and read them offline. Bang! The branches slapped the ground, instantly creating a crack mark. If this thing were to hit a person's body, it would most likely be able to easily whip a person's body into mush. Mr. Chintian, save them. I'll restrain it. Z yelled at this time. Mr. Chintian nodded quickly and warned, don't force yourself. It's been a long time since you saw the sun. I know what to do. Z nodded and lit a Molotov cocktail. Then, he dashed toward the waving branches of the Christmas tree. At this moment, Remia witnessed the agility beyond the limits of the human body. Z was moving among the branches like a bolt of lightning. Flames were ignited and many branches of the Christmas tree were ignited. At this time, the coach square suddenly shook. The floor began to crazily crack, and from the cement floor, thick roots began to emerge. Obviously, the main body of the Christmas tree was enraged. Meanwhile, Mr. Chintian came to Kaz and Taramaru's side, but both Kaz and Taramaru were huge. With Mr. Chintian's thin body, he couldn't even sit on one of them, let alone save them. What should we do? The coach square continued to shake as if it would collapse at any moment. Remia was anxious but couldn't do anything. What should we do? If this goes on, we'll all be buried here. Just as she was feeling anxious, Remia's eyes suddenly lit up as if she had seen something. She turned around resolutely and rushed up the stairs of the plaza. See, I can't carry these two guys. Mr. Chintian used his back to push Taramaru, but it was useless. You have to do it. I need some time. Z wandered among the branches. Although the branches could be ignited, the main body of the Christmas tree was difficult to ignite, or rather, the trunk of the Christmas tree was too huge. The Molotov cocktail extinguished it after a while. There was only one Molotov cocktail left. Z go and save Kaz and Taramaru." At this moment, Remia's voice came from above. Z looked up instinctively and saw that Remia had already climbed to the top of the plaza and had even climbed out of the guardrail. At this moment, Remia was holding onto a steel pipe with both hands, her entire body hanging in midair. "Remia, go and save them." As she spoke, Remia's body began to sway on the steel pipe. She swayed more and more until suddenly, as though she had reached her limit, she let go of her hands. In the next instant, Remia flew out. Her target was the huge chandelier hanging at the top of the coach's plaza. She grabbed the frame of the chandelier and used the inertia to lift her legs and clamp down on the other side of the frame. Then, she gritted her teeth and climbed up. Z had a premonition that Remia was going to do something. He dashed towards clear sky. At the same time, Remia, who had climbed to the top of the chandelier, started hacking at the joints of the chandelier with her long sword. The girl's strength was astonishing. The sound of metal hitting metal was loud. With a ding sound, the lock suddenly broke, and the huge chandelier fell down. The falling chandelier smashed into the crown of the Christmas tree and entangled with it. At this time, Remia bit the blade of the sword with her mouth and grabbed the joint of the dome with her hand. Her heart raced as she looked down at the scene below. Z dragged Kat's and Tarmaru's bodies and quickly rushed to the exit of the station square. The girl was surprised by Z's strength. But at this moment, a soft sound entered Remia's ears. She looked up instinctively. A crack had appeared on the dome of the coach square. Remia narrowed her eyes, only to see the crack slowly extending towards her. She immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. The crack bloomed like a thunder tree, and the dome of the coach square shattered. Rumble, rumble. At the exit of the station square, Z threw Kat's and Tarmaru out with all his might. Then he kicked Fairski back and sent him flying as well. The coach square started to collapse, but Remia was still in the middle. Clouds of dust rose, and the Christmas tree was buried under the rubble. More than half of the station square in front of him had collapsed. Looking at the ruins in front of him, Z frowned and jumped up. Gray snow was still falling in the city, and the temperature was getting colder. Z searched the ruins, but to no avail. At this moment, a stone slab suddenly cracked open, and a broken sword suddenly emerged from the pile of stones. Then a blood-stained hand stretched out. The hand grabbed the edge of another stone slab and exerted force. Remia's head popped out, and she was gasping for air. Z opened his mouth and quickly walked towards the girl. Seeing Z, Remia revealed a bright smile. Then she extended her hand and made a victory sign. "Am I rude?" The girl said. "I don't look like a lady." Chapter 2180. During breakfast, the girl almost finished the shredded carrots on her plate, but she picked out all the onions. "What's this drama?" She looked at the TV listlessly as if it wasn't a big deal. She realized that her brother had been watching too much TV these days. "I don't know, it was on when I turned it on," Boss Luo said casually. The girl glanced at it. It seemed to be a story about a group of people traveling in the ruins. She felt that the dramas that were broadcasted recently were a bit strange. This female lead, the girl blinked and said, "What if she fell down halfway? And such a large area of collapse didn't kill her. It's not scientific. Even the protagonist's aura can't be activated like this. Okay? You don't seem to like this girl," Boss Luo suddenly said. The girl shrugged. "I can't say whether I like her or not. Anyway, I didn't see what happened in front of me, so I don't know how she is. Besides, who knew if she was that kind of person? To be honest, what you see is just a side of her that people let you see. That's all." Boss Luo smiled and didn't say anything. Children at this age, no matter if they were boys or girls, even himself, seemed to be similar. "I'm full." The girl suddenly stood up and then hurriedly ran into the room as if she was afraid that someone would force her to finish the remaining shredded onions. Boss Luo smiled and then started to clear the table. The Freedom Holy Temple was a place that all the areas under the jurisdiction of Freedom City, one of the 7 capitals, would build together to worship the Sage of Freedom. Of course, there were big and small ones, luxurious and exquisite ones, and simple ones. In the beginning, there was no Freedom Holy Temple. But since 200 years ago, this custom began to spread from Freedom City. People heard that the sage liked it, so they started to build it. The village's Freedom Holy Temple was built 50 years ago. All these years, it had been used as a place for celebrations and the awakening ceremony of the Saintess candidates. Normally, villagers were not allowed to enter. Let's go back. At night, two young children were quietly avoiding the people patrolling the village at night. But Dashiu, haven't you always wanted to enter the sacred palace to take a look? Dashio, the boy hesitated and said, "That's right, but if we enter without permission and are discovered." Relax, relax. The younger girl raised her head and said, "The priestess has already confirmed that I am a candidate for the Holy Maiden. I can enter the Holy Temple at any time in the future. That's only because the High Priestess likes me a lot. Even if she finds out, she'll just scold me. There won't be a problem," the girl urged. "Besides, she just needs to take a look, right? Just take it as your birthday present. We'll take a look and go back, okay?" Then, the boy nodded hesitantly. As she had entered the holy sanctum before, the girl clearly knew a lot about the paths in the holy sanctum. They soon arrived at the main hall. The statue of the holy sage of the City of Freedom was enshrined here. The boy was quickly attracted by the statue of the holy sage. Gradually, he walked to the statue in a daze. "Remia, is this the holy sage? It's so beautiful. If only I could wear something like this." "Dashi, what did you just say?" The girl looked at him in confusion. The boy immediately shook his head and waved his hand. "No, I didn't say anything." "Okay, Remia, I've seen it. I'm satisfied. Let's leave this place quickly." "Wait a minute." The girl suddenly walked closer to the holy sage statue. She even grabbed it with both hands and was about to climb up the statue. "Remia, what are you doing?" The girl looked at the gem on the forehead of the holy sage statue and said quickly, "The high priestess said that the more devout a believer is, the more grace they will receive when they touch the gem. I want to try it." The boy was shocked. "Remia, come down. It's too dangerous. Besides, the touching ceremony will also be held on the day you turn 14. Don't mess around." "I know." The girl had climbed halfway up the statue. "I'll know it sooner or later, but why can't I know it earlier? I'm about to touch it. Dashiu, can you hear me? It seems that someone is calling me." "Who?" "Voice, I heard the voice. It's the holy sage. The holy sage must be talking to me." The girl became more excited. "The holy sage heard my prayer. The holy sage allowed it. Great." She reached out her hand as if she was going to pick a ripe fruit hanging from the tree. She was about to touch it. At this moment, the girl lost her footing and fell down from the upper part of the statue. The fruit was moving away from her rapidly. "Remia!" The boy's horrified yell sounded in the main hall. At the same time, the gem on the statue emitted dazzling light. Instantly, grayish-white flames filled the entire main hall. The Freedom Holy Palace of the village was ablaze. It was a huge fire that seemed to devour everything. "Dashi, Dashi!" she shouted in horror. Soon, someone held her shoulders and calmed her down. Remia opened her eyes and saw the face of an armored man. It was Mr. Katz, the armored man. Hey, it's okay, it's okay." Katz released his hand slowly. "Do you feel better, Remia?" "What happened to me?" The armored man, Mr. Katz, said in a low voice. "You were so tired that you fainted. So we found a place nearby and hid. After all, it's almost night, and the monsters are very active at night. Also, I heard from Z and Qingtian about your heroic deeds. Thank you for saving us." Remia curled up and hugged her knees with both hands. She showed an ugly smile. "Actually, I was very scared, and if I could do it again, I probably wouldn't do it again." Katz and Taramaru looked at each other. Taramaru was holding a can of food that had been heated and placed it in front of Remia. "By the way, where are Z and Qingtian? Why aren't they here?" Remia looked around. It seemed to be a shop. There were no products on the shelves, and she couldn't tell what it used to be. Katz got some cabinets and formed a circle. "Oh, Qingtian is feeding." Katz was about to say something. At this time, the little blue bird suddenly flew to Kaz's head, pecked him a few times, and said loudly, "My stomach is full of me. Didn't you say you would heat up food for me? Can't you do it yourself? Stupid bird. Katz waved his hand and slapped it. If the armored man's hand really hit it, the little blue bird would probably die. The little blue bird immediately flew away with a strange cry. Remia picked up the can of food and smiled. If you don't mind, let's eat together. The little blue bird flew to Remia's shoulder and chirped. You're too nice. Katz looked at Remia and muttered. This bird will be obedient after a few meals. Remia just smiled and gently stroked the little blue bird's feathers. And Chington should be back soon. Tarmaru said, Remia, you should rest for a while. Perhaps it was because Tarmaru and Kaz had been injured by the Christmas tree, but they were not in the best of moods. Not long after Remia woke up, the two of them were already snoring loudly. The little blue bird was also asleep, probably because it was too comfortable being stroked. Since Chington weren't back yet, the sound of wind and snow could be heard outside, but it wasn't very loud. Remia gently put down the little blue bird in her arms and crawled out of the cupboard. She needed to deal with some physiological problems, so it was not good for her to stay here. Her unsharpened sword had been broken at the station square. Z and Qing Tian didn't seem to have picked it up. Remia took a piece of wood from the shop and hugged it to her chest. Then, she went deeper into the shop to find a suitable place to relieve herself. However, the shop didn't seem to have a bathroom. Perhaps it was upstairs, but the ceiling had collapsed and blocked the stairs. She could only go through the back door of the shop to the alley outside. If there was no other way, she could only relieve herself on the spot. However, it was difficult for women to accept this method. The alley was abnormally quiet, but at this moment, Remia seemed to see a faint light coming from the back door of the shop next door. Remia's heart skipped a beat. She gritted her teeth and slowly approached. She seemed to have vaguely heard someone talking. It sounded like Mr. Qing Tian's voice. It was originally in the shop next door, but why was it here? What did it want to do? Remia cautiously approached the door and hesitantly opened it a little. She saw that the light was coming from underground. There was a basement in the shop, and the light came from the crack in the basement. Remia carefully opened the door of the basement a little and peeked in. The basement was not big, and it was very bright. She could see everything in it at a glance. Remia's gaze froze. She even instinctively covered her mouth with her hand. She saw Z. However, the Z in the basement was like the Z she didn't know, because this Z wasn't human at all. In the basement, Z was leaning against the wall. However, his chest was open. In the open chest, Remia saw gears, pipes, cylinders, and even a heart made of mechanical parts. At this time, this open chest was connected to two black cables. Mr. Fairski was fiddling with something at the side, and there were more than 10 old batteries on the ground. You won't be able to hold on for long. Mr. Qingtan suddenly said, If you don't leave this place, I don't know if you can wake up again. Z said slowly, It's fine as long as I can see the sun. Then, let's go to a place with the sun, Mr. Qingtan said. We can't go now. Z shook his head. Remia can't walk in the snow for a few days. She will freeze to death. We shouldn't have brought her along. Mr. Qingtian shook his head. The current world isn't suitable for humans to live in. You shouldn't have saved her from the start. You saw it too. At that time, what was that sound? Mr. Qingtian suddenly raised his head and frowned. He jumped out of the basement and walked all the way to the back alley of the shop. He looked around in confusion. After careful observation, he didn't find anything. He muttered to himself and quickly returned to the shop, closing the door. Outside the alley, the girl covered her mouth with both hands, perhaps because of the cold, or perhaps because of fear. Her body trembled slightly. Suddenly, the girl slid down the wall and sat down. She felt that her pants were drenched and soon froze into ice shards because of the cold. Don't tell Kaz and the others about me. Before entering the shop, he looked at Mr. Qingtian and said in a low voice, This will help maintain everyone's mental state. Don't worry, I know what to do. Mr. Qingtian nodded. They entered the shop from the back door and climbed over the circle of cabinets. Everyone was already sound asleep. Z glanced at Remia casually, only to see her curled up in a corner by herself. Z came to Remia's side and looked at her. Then, He reached out and gently pressed Remia's shoulder. He seemed to have felt a slight tremor. Z took off his jacket and covered Remia's body. He looked at Qingtian and said softly, "You should rest too. I'll keep watch." Qingtian didn't refuse. He nodded and squeezed into Taramaru's arms. It was a good source of warmth. Z glanced at Remia and sat down. He took out a book from his pocket. It was the book that he had been reading. With the help of the dim light, he started to flip through the pages. But soon, as if he thought of something, Z took out another book. This was the book that Remia gave him on the train. Little Prince. In the quiet night, other than the sound of sleeping, there was only the sound of pages being flipped. Remia bit her fist, afraid that she would break the silence if she made any noise. She was still shivering from the cold. Figures floated in front of the bed. The village chief, the priest of the holy temple, and the elders of the village looked at her with concern. They looked at the hope of the village, the holy maiden candidate who hadn't appeared in the village for many years. "Remia, you're finally awake. That's great." The village chief was excited. "Last night, there was a fire in the holy temple. After we rescued you and your brother, you didn't wake up? What happened? Why did the holy temple catch fire?" The girl looked at the people around her in a daze. The village chief, the priest, the elders of the village, they were all these people. "That's right, Remia. What's going on? Did you all do something to blaspheme the saints? That's why you're being punished." The girl on the bed shivered when she saw the sharp gazes of the people around her. She felt cold. She had never felt so cold before. "Remia, it's Daesu." The girl on the bed covered her face and cried. "It's Daesu. He wanted me to bring him into the holy temple. He said he only wanted to take a look. I said no, but I'm sorry, I should have stopped him. I should have stopped him from touching the statue's gem. I'm sorry." The people around the bed frowned and looked at the priest of the holy temple. The priest held up a crystal ball in his hand. After a moment of silence, he said slowly, "Revelation from the holy maiden. Remia didn't lie. Didn't lie." The girl's face, which was hidden by her hands, became dazed. "I didn't lie? Yes, I didn't lie." Chapter 2181. The snowstorm stopped unexpectedly. On the second day after the incident at the train station, the sky was still gloomy and the temperature was not much warmer than when there was a snowstorm. However, the view was much better. After the group of people hurriedly packed up, they continued to search for supplies. It was not easy to find some useful items on the train yesterday, but they were all lost when they were in the coach square. Monsters usually did not move during the day. They preferred to sleep in dark corners. Therefore, they could move boldly during the day, as long as they did not enter places where there was no light. Mr. Katz had told Remia all this. Probably due to the incident at the train station, Remia felt that Katz and Taramaru were much more friendly to her than before. "How is it? What did you see?" On a tall tower, Z was using binoculars to observe the distance. Z put down the binoculars and looked down. He saw Taramaru carrying Remia and jumping up the tower easily. "There's a snowstorm outside the city." Z shook his head. "It's everywhere except here. It's a bit strange." Remia thought for a moment and said, "I heard that a typhoon will appear at a place called the Eye of the Storm. In the Eye of the Storm, it will be calm and peaceful. Could it be the same?" Z shook his head again. She did not know if it was a denial or he was not sure himself. "Can I take a look?" Remia looked at the binoculars in Z's hand with a look of anticipation. Z did not refuse. She immediately used the binoculars. She looked at the vast expanse of gray in front of her as though she was trying hard to find something. For a while, she fixed the binoculars in a certain direction. "Do you want to take a look?" she suddenly said. Remia subconsciously put down the binoculars in her hand and looked at his pair of eyes that did not seem to be lively. "Z is not a human. He is just that place." Z smiled and said, "The place where I found you and your companions there." He pointed in the same direction as when Remia was holding the binoculars. Remia nodded subconsciously. "Why do I have to do this here? Do you think I can move these stones?" In the ruins of the station square, the unscrupulous employer, Qingtian, was giving the tireless iron armor cats a hard time by making him do unpaid work. What exactly are you looking for? Kaz lifted a big rock and threw it aside. Qing Tian asked it to dig a tunnel as much as possible. There's something I'm rather concerned about. Mr. Qing Tian said, we've been traveling for so long, but this is the first time we've seen a plant-type monster, right? It seems that's the case. Kaz was startled. Then, I saw it. Mr. Qing Tian said seriously. When I was fighting against the Christmas tree monster, I saw something, but the situation was very bad at that time, and I didn't have time to look at it carefully. So I want to study it. All right, get back to work. Okay. The armored man replied weakly. Before this place turned into ruins, it was similar to a bank. Remia and her classmates had spent half a month in this ruined city. On the way, Remia gradually became less talkative. When they reached the door, Taramaru put her down. The door is blocked, and the gap is too small. Taramaru, please stand guard outside. Remia and I will go in, Z said. Don't worry. If there's anything, I'll call out. Remia stood at the entrance, hesitating. She glanced at Z, subconsciously, nodded silently, and walked in. The space inside was actually quite spacious. When you were hiding here, did you open the vault of the bank? Z's voice was suddenly heard. Remia seemed to be frightened. What did you just say? Vault, Z said casually. We found some before. The things inside are well preserved. Remia shook her head. The world is already like this. Even if there's a lot of wealth, it won't be enough. Z said, it's not wealth, but it's still wealth. Remia looked at him in confusion. Z explained, I think it's something called a safe. In the past, people would keep the things they thought were the most valuable in it. So other than money, gold, and gems, they would occasionally find something else, although it's very rare. I didn't open it. Remia shook her head. She seemed to have thought of something and turned her face away. She whispered, I'm just an ordinary person. How can I open it? We're here. Z pointed ahead. The place where you were found. Remia nodded softly. Then, she slowed down her pace. She was familiar with the environment here. After all, she had lived here for a period of time. She even knew this place like the back of her hand. In order to make it easier for her to escape from the attacks of monsters, she had memorized the layout of the surroundings. Remia finally came to a bank employee's office. There were still some traces of her temporary stay here. The girl subconsciously blew warm air on her hands and asked in a low voice, Z, did you help move my classmate's body? No. Z shook his head. I moved her to the table, but she seems to have disappeared. Remia stared blankly at the only table in the room. She asked subconsciously, what do you mean by disappeared? Z thought for a moment and said, the temperature is so low. It's impossible for her to rot. I also said that your classmate has no signs of life, which means the most likely possibility is that she was taken away by monsters. Of course, there's another possibility. What? Other than you. There are other companions here. Z thought for a moment and said, if they found the body and happened to know it, they would probably take it away. But maybe it's something we don't know. Remia revealed a puzzled look. Z simply said that there were no traces of monsters nearby. At most, there were his and Remia's footprints. The body might have disappeared on its own. How could the body disappear on its own? Remia shook her head. She really hoped that Z's words were true. I want to stay here for a while. Remia suddenly said in a low voice, can I be alone? I'll go inside and take a look. Z nodded. Maybe I can open the vault and find something. As footsteps started to fade away, she realized that as footsteps were heavy, probably because S' body was much heavier than a human's. No wonder she couldn't hear her heartbeat. Remia curled up in a corner. This was a temporary place that she had set up when she was hiding here. It was used to keep her warm at night. She hugged her legs and buried her face in them. This was where she started from the beginning. In such a small, cold, and dark room, Li Yundong was in a daze. This was the dungeon used in the village to imprison the villagers who had committed crimes. The dungeon was dark, and the water was tide water. When night fell, it was even colder. Dasher, 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 can you hear me? A voice called out. In the dungeon, the little boy hugged his knees and sat in the corner. He raised his head and looked at the only skylight above him. Remia, the little boy instantly got up and rushed to the skylight. He raised his head. Remia, it's really you. Shoo, don't be so loud. The little girl gestured for him to be quiet. Then, she took out some roasted potatoes from her pockets and stuffed them into the dungeon through the skylight. The little boy must have been hungry for a long time. He caught one and hurriedly ate it. She saw the crisscrossing wounds on the little boy's back. This was the punishment for blaspheming the holy temple. In the following month, there would be 3 more punishments. If Dasher wasn't a child, the punishment wouldn't be so light, compared to the punishment of being burned at the stake. In silence, large drops of tears fell from Remia's eyes. Dasher, I'm sorry. The little boy who was wolfing down the food suddenly stopped. He felt a lump in his throat. He knelt on the ground and hurriedly wiped his face with his clothes. When he raised his head again, he smiled. Shh, don't be so loud. The high priest has already told me. The little girl opened her mouth. Her face became extremely pale. She said in a trembling voice, What did the high priest say to you? Dasher said, The high priest said that this is the only way to treat both of us well. If I don't admit that I offended the saint, you will probably be disqualified as the Holy Maiden candidate. Anyway, I can't become the Holy Maiden, right? But you're different. That's your dream. Besides, it's just a small injury. It's nothing. You all said that I'm not like a man. With these scars, I'll see who else can say that I'm not like a man. No, there won't be any scars. I'll pray. I'll pray until your scars disappear. The little girl quickly replied in a terrified manner. Soon after, she paused and said hesitantly, Then did the Grand Priestess say anything else to you? No. Dasher shook his head. The High Priest told me to stay here. When the time is up, he will let me out. He doesn't know. Dasher doesn't know. It's actually me. It's actually me. The little girl's lips trembled. However, a deep voice suddenly rang out, along with the white-robed high priest of the temple. You shouldn't have come here. The high priestess of the holy temple said calmly. Remia, have you finished your homework for today? The little girl didn't dare to look into the high priest's eyes. She lowered her head and could only see Dasher in the dungeon. Dasher stuck out his tongue at her and waved his hand, indicating that she should leave quickly. The high priest turned around and left. The little girl gritted her teeth and could only follow him silently. The holy temple was burned down. She could only temporarily study in the high priest's house. They didn't say anything along the way. When they were about to see the house, the high priest suddenly stopped. He looked up at the starry sky and said indifferently, Do you have something to say? Remia opened her mouth. Why didn't you tell Dasher that it's me? Is there any meaning in doing this? The high priest said, You will lose your qualification as a candidate. You and your brother will probably be exiled because you offended the holy temple. Now, you will continue to be a candidate for the Holy Maiden. As for your brother, he will be fine as long as he suffers some hardship. Don't worry. After some time, I will let Dasher out. You can still live like before. Isn't this the lie? She looked at him in horror. A lie? The high priest turned around and looked at the little girl in front of him expressionlessly. The truth will cause you to lose everything, but the lie can keep your little happiness. In this way, is there still a need to care about the truth and the lie? She seemed to have sensed something terrifying. She subconsciously took 2 steps back. Then, High Priest, you said, the sage's revelation, is it also? The high priest gave the little girl a meaningful smile. Very soon, you will experience all the convenience that lies have given you. But when you try to expose the lie, let's not talk about other things first. I wonder how your brother, who loves you so much, will feel when he finds out that you betrayed him first. She shook her head. Remia slowly raised her head. Z's face was just inches away from her. You have cried. Yes, Remia said softly. I remember the time when I lived with my companions. At that time, we had just entered the school and were assigned to the same dormitory. We even chatted until dawn. We even promised each other that we would graduate together, and tears welled up in her eyes. Her voice stopped here. Suddenly she hugged Z tightly and burst into tears. I'm really scared. Really, really scared. Z patted her shoulder. I saw that you were quite brave at the square of the station. I pretended, Remius said softly. At that time, I only knew that if I didn't risk my life, we would all be in danger. I said before, I won't be able to do it again. I'm not as brave as you think. Z blinked and looked at the emotional girl in front of him. What he heard was the girl's steady heartbeat. I found something inside. Do you want to take a look? The girl raised her head in confusion and nodded subconsciously. Wow, oh. Something began to fall from the sky and fell directly into the gray snow pile. Then it stuck its head out like a groundhog. Okay, it's this kind of blank opening again. In this damn place, we can't use our strength again. Yulia, Chan, what's wrong, Senior 11? I'm sorry, I pressed on you. Not this. The young man laughed heartily. I want to ask you, are you fast at running? Not bad. The girl raised her nose without hesitation. That's good. The young man nodded. Then let's start running. Huh? Senior. Yulia looked around and saw that there were dark shadows all around, as if something was approaching them in groups. It was a group of creatures that looked like snow wolves, but had sharper teeth and claws than snow wolves. Moreover, they had a single horn on their heads. F***CK. Chapter 2182. I might be the most pitiful black soul envoy, really. Looking at the wounds on her body, where she was bitten by the horned demon wolves, mainly because a certain indescribable part of her body also suffered. Yulia looked at Madanzo with a serious expression. You still have me to accompany you. The angelic young man smiled casually to comfort her. Yulia couldn't help but cast him a sidelong glance, but in the end, she gave up on arguing with 11 years before. Senior 11, an incipient black soul python. Who knows if Madanzo has any other strange tricks up her sleeves? Yulia shook her head and crawled out from her hiding place. From the looks of it, the pack of wolves they encountered on the snowy ground had already dispersed, and they had dispersed all of a sudden. They seemed to be afraid of something. Yulia observed the ruined city in front of her and frowned. There seems to be something here that they are afraid of, Madanzo casually replied. No matter what kind of creature it is, they all have a sense of territory. Perhaps we've entered the territory of an even more powerful creature. All right, take out your 2 pages as well. Yulia didn't hesitate and took out the pages she obtained from the 2 worlds, not because she was 11 years before. She was just watching. Even while being chased by the pack of wolves, Madanzo still didn't give up on Celine and forcefully carried the unconscious Celine all the way. The wounds on this guy's body were probably even more than his own. At this time, Madanzo placed the 2 pages into the half of the Book of Gaia that she obtained. However, only the page from the Crayon Kingdom could be placed inside. As for the page from the Wraith Realm, it was floating by itself outside, but they seemed to have strangely become one. Senior, what's the situation now? Madanzo replied. It seems that all page worlds are the same. They all need to find the core page of their world to complete this Book of Gaia. Looking at the situation, Kerrigan had already collected most of it, and the Book of Gaia should have recovered most of its functions. Unfortunately, now that it has been split into 2, the recovery function seems to have been frozen again. Yulia looked at 11 and smiled without saying anything. You were the one who cut open the book, okay? Although there aren't many left, it's still possible to use them to locate the center of the world, Madanzo said. Otherwise, we would have landed here directly. You mean in this city? Yulia subconsciously looked at the ruined city. This city wasn't small. Although it had become a ruin, it wasn't hard to see how developed it was before it became a ruin. The predecessor of this place was definitely an area of explosive population and economic development. She even saw many abandoned bridges in the air. Although most of these winding bridges had disappeared, they all seemed to have once led to the same place. Is there something in the sky above this city? Madanzo looked up and thought for a bit, then said, Perhaps we can go to the center of this city to take a look. Saying so, Madanzo closed the Book of Gaia in her hand and stuffed it in her chest pocket. Let's do it. The Book of Gaia. S reaction is quite strong. If nothing unexpected happens, we might meet the protagonist of this world here. Yulia blinked, feeling a bit curious. She was curious about what the protagonist in the form of a boss would look like this time. She had met the boss of the Crayon Kingdom world, but she had never met the boss of the Wraith Realm. According to what Madanzo said, it was a mischievous Shota type. A boss. A Shota version of a boss. I could brag about it for the rest of my life. Senpai, let me carry Miss Selai on for now, Yulia suddenly said. Do you want to treat your wounds first? What a sensible newcomer. Of course not. The heavy door of the vault had already been opened. No matter how you looked at it, it didn't look like a huge iron door that could be opened by human strength. Remia looked at it curiously, wondering what he had found when he brought her to the vault of the bank. After entering, she saw a lot of neatly stacked gold. She didn't feel much about this, even though the large pile of gold still gave her a bit of shock. Z had already found some random items from the safe on the side and took them out, placing them on the table in front of the gold. He seemed to be showing off his spoils of war. Remia looked at Z as spoils of war with interest. They looked expensive, but they didn't seem to have much value. Remia even saw a rather ordinary wooden music box. She instinctively picked up the music box and opened it. As the spring spun, the sound was still crisp and pleasant even after many years. The parts inside didn't even have any traces of rust. Although it looked ordinary, the workmanship wasn't simple at all. Remia felt that she might have underestimated the value of this music box. I like this music box. Z stood beside her and exclaimed, "This is the best music box I've ever found." This world had always been terrifyingly quiet. This world wasn't black and white, but a world without sound was more lonely than a black and white silent film. Remia subconsciously asked, "Do you know the name of this song?" She was even intoxicated by the sound of the music box and unknowingly became distracted. Z shook his head, indicating that he didn't know either. We still know too little about what happened before the civilization was destroyed. I feel much better, Remia suddenly said faintly. She held the music box in her hands and seemed to like it very much. That's good. Z smiled. There are still some things ahead. Do you want to take a look? She asked curiously. What is it? A door, Z said directly. Behind the door, there's a passage that leads to the underground. Remia was stunned. Passage? It's open. Along with Iron-Armored Man Kaz's surprised yell, the collapsed station square finally opened up. Mr. Qingtian leaned in and looked inside. The space in the square wasn't completely covered because the Christmas tree monster's body had blocked a lot of space. They crawled in through the hole and carefully landed on the ground. Using the torch to illuminate the front, they saw that the Christmas tree monster had broken many branches and many steel bars stuck in its body. There were many burn marks on its body. It seemed that after the square collapsed, the fire didn't extinguish immediately. Could it have been roasted to death? I feel that it has lost its dignity as a monster. Qing Tian shook his head. Then, it came to the bottom of the Christmas tree monster's trunk and dug out a large number of bones buried under the trunk. It saw that there seemed to be something hidden under the bones. Vaguely, there was a bright red light shining through. Kaz swept the bones with force and spread them out. Instantly, a red light shone on them. There was a big bulge at the root of the Christmas tree monster's trunk. No, it should be said that the roots at the bottom of the trunk were wrapped in a huge red cocoon-like object that looked like amber. There was a person hidden in the red cocoon-like object. It was a girl who seemed to be in a deep sleep. Kaz and Qingtian looked at each other. This was something they had never encountered on their journey. Should we break it open and take a look? Kaz suggested subconsciously. Mr. Qingtian pondered for a while and finally shook his head. Don't touch the thing inside. It's a little strange. Let's call the others and see what's inside. Okay, Kaz nodded. You go and inform Z and the others. I'll stay here and watch. Mr. Qingtian shook his head. No, you go and inform them. I'll stay here and watch. Why? Kaz shouted unhappily. Because your hands are dirty. You always like to touch things. How can this world be so barren? They walked on a road covered with gray snow. The buildings on both sides of the road had long collapsed. The surroundings were terrifyingly quiet. What they heard the most was their own footsteps. I'm starting to feel hungry and thirsty. Madanzo even sounded a little out of breath. It's too bad. This page world has solidified our bodies into the state of ordinary people. In other words, Senior Yulia's expression changed slightly. There's a possibility that we will freeze to death or starve to death. If the situation doesn't get better, it's probably like that. Madanzo shook her head. Of course, we can choose to leave this page world now. Let's wait and see. Senior's sister, Yulia, pondered for a moment before saying, as long as the worst-case scenario isn't reached. Moreover, we have to find the pages. Even if we give up now, we'll have to come back sooner or later, right? At this moment, Metatro was looking at the sky in confusion. What's wrong? I feel like something is watching us. Madanzo also frowned. However, the sky was gray and the city was still quiet. Senior Yulia also looked around in confusion, but didn't see anything. She thought for a while and said, "Be careful." They continued walking on the silent and deserted streets. At this moment, there was a pair of sharp eyes looking at the traces of people on the grayish-white snow. It was a little blue bird. Suddenly, the little blue bird flapped its wings and swooped down, quickly disappearing in another direction. Taramaru. The last place the blue bird landed was the head of the huge toad, Taramaru. Weren't you investigating the environment? Why did you come back? I found some people. People, living humans like Remia. The blue bird quickly said, "Where's it? Hasn't she come out yet?" "Yeah, she's been in there for some time." Taramaru shook his head and said, "There's no movement." Maybe Z found something interesting. He's always like that. Whenever he sees something interesting, he'll be fascinated. "I'll go in and take a look," the bluebird said and flew into the bank. The tunnel behind the hidden door of the bank vault was built very sturdily. It was made of metal walls. However, the cold still invaded the place, and there was a lot of frost on the metal walls. "If you're cold, you can come closer to me," suddenly said. She found that as long as she was close to the surrounding temperature seemed to increase a lot. Z wasn't a human, but Remia pretended not to know and silently enjoyed the warmth. "I wonder who built such a passageway." Z didn't answer. The tunnel wasn't long, and they soon reached the end. In front of them was a door with an electronic lock beside it. However, the electronic lock screen had been turned off. Obviously, it had lost its power source. Z used a crowbar to pry open the door. Then, he exerted force with both hands and opened the door easily, but there was another door inside. Z opened the doors one by one. Finally, a space of about 100 square meters appeared in front of them. From the looks of it, it looked like a laboratory. There were all kinds of instruments on the sides of the walls. They were all in a black screen state. The ground was covered with dense assembly lines. These lines were all connected to a gigantic, egg-like object in the center of the space. "Why don't we not go in?" Remia instinctively grabbed Z's wrist. "There shouldn't be any monsters here." Z observed for a while and said, "Moreover, I've never encountered these things before. Maybe we can find some clues before the civilization was destroyed, the clues I need." Remia was stunned. She hesitantly loosened her grip a little. She remembered Z said that he was looking for someone very important to him. He had been traveling in this apocalyptic world because of this. She had no reason to stop Z from finding any clues. "Be careful," she said softly. But Z's method of finding clues was rather direct or violent. Under Remia's astonished gaze, Z lifted the crowbar and ran to the egg-like object in the middle. He inserted the crowbar into the gap and pried it open. This egg-like object was made of metal. But the moment he pried open a corner of the eggshell, the instruments in the basement suddenly lit up. They were flashing with a dark red light. There was also a piercing, buzzing sound. At the same time, the eggshell emitted a faint blue light. Then, a large amount of white gas erupted in all directions. It was slowly opening. Like a petal, the eggshell slowly opened. Z retreated to Remia's side and stared intently. When the eggshell cracked open, a 2-meter-tall cylinder appeared. When the cylinder opened, A woman wearing a thin white robe appeared in the cylinder. Gamma, the white gas slowly sank. At the same time, this voice sounded. Remia instinctively looked at who seemed to be in a daze. You know this woman? Remia suddenly felt uneasy. She subconsciously grabbed his wrist and asked. He seemed to come back to his senses. His gaze was blank for a moment before he shook his head. I don't know, but this name suddenly flashed past my mind. Broke free from Remia's hand and walked towards the sleeping woman in the pillar. Z. She looked at his back and couldn't help but bite her lip. Chapter 2183. Wait! Just as he was about to touch the woman in the cylindrical cabin, Remia suddenly stopped him and said quickly, Why don't we be more careful? After all, we don't know what's going on. He stopped when he heard that, but very quickly, the chest of the woman in the cabin suddenly rose and fell, as if she was stimulated by an electric current. The woman suddenly opened her eyes and took a deep breath. She seemed to have woken up, but soon fainted and fell out of the cylindrical cabin. Z was quick to catch the woman. After a while, Remia walked closer and asked hesitantly, What happened to her? Her vital signs are low, but... Z looked at Remia and blinked. She's still alive. Alive. Remia's heart skipped a beat. Being alive meant many things. Z, are you inside? I'm coming in. At this moment, Bluebird's voice came from outside. In the next moment, a small figure flew in and landed on his shoulder. I saw a few people who looked like Remia outside. Why is there one here? In the secret underground room of the vault, he wasn't in a hurry to take action after learning from Bluebird that there were new strangers in the ruined city. Instead, he started taking care of the woman who walked out of the cylindrical cabin. The woman's breathing gradually stabilized. In Z's words, her vital signs were returning to normal, but she was still weak. Remia asked him what was the basis of his judgment and how he knew, but didn't explain. He only said that he knew, and that was all. Bluebird was sent out to follow the three strangers. Remia finally realized that his tour group had always had a clear division of labor. The members of the tour group each had their own advantages and abilities. Bluebird was obviously very suitable to be the scout of the group. It could observe everything from the sky and discover many unknowns. She suddenly had a thought. Back then, Z had come into contact with her and saved her from the freezing cold. Did he already know about her existence and only came to contact her after observing her for a while? If that was the case, then Remia, she's about to wake up, suddenly said. The unknown woman was wearing a jacket which was taken off by... This woman's clothes were too thin. At this moment, under the gazes of the two people, the woman's eyes moved slightly and opened again. She seemed to be unable to adapt and tried several times. After a while, she finally opened her eyes completely. You are, she said weakly. Z introduced himself. This is Remia, our current partner. Z. Remia, the woman was stunned. She struggled in Z's arms and seemed to want to stand up. Z helped her up, and the woman began to look around the secret underground room. At this time, the woman whispered, Help me to the front. Z seemed to be in a daze, but quickly reacted. He supported the woman beside him and slowly moved to the side of the equipment in the secret room. Remia frowned. Although the woman's voice was weak, her tone sounded as if she was giving a natural order. The woman came to the side of the equipment and found a screen on the dusty panel. She pressed her palm on it, but after pressing it, a line of words flashed on the screen. The woman was absent-minded for a long time before she said with a bitter smile, How long has it been? I actually used up all the energy here. Z and Remia exchanged glances. Remia frowned subconsciously. May I know what you mean? The woman sized up Remia as though she was thinking about something. Suddenly, she reached out her hand and wanted to touch Remia's body. What are you doing? Remia instinctively took 2 steps back. The woman said, I don't mean any harm. I just want to confirm. Trust me. Remia hesitated for a moment before reaching out her hand. The woman flipped Remia's hand away. After a while, she suddenly asked, Where did you wake up? What do you mean by where did I wake up? Remia was confused. The woman said, "You don't know me?" Remia shook her head. How could she possibly know all the people in this world, let alone know she had seen everything in her life before? She was a resident of the free city. What about the past? The woman asked again. How much do you know about the past? Before this world was destroyed. Remia shook her head. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. This is not where I originally came from. Because of an accident, after I woke up, I suddenly appeared here. I only feel fear and strangeness towards everything here. I see. The woman nodded. She pondered for a moment before nodding. I'm afraid that the long hibernation caused some problems in your memory and caused you to lose your memories before the apocalypse. But it doesn't matter. It might be a good thing that you can't remember such a terrifying thing. I still don't understand what you're talking about. Remia took a deep breath. Also, who are you? Why do you seem to know a lot of things? The woman laughed self-deprecatingly. How can I not know? As a survivor before the end of civilization, of course I know everything. Survivor? My name is Gamma, the woman said softly. Don't worry, I will tell you everything. After all, you're different from... You're the same as me. In this world, there aren't many humans left. What exactly are you? This was a world where technology was developing too fast. This also caused the rapid depletion of various resources that humans relied on to survive. The energy crisis caused humans to turn their attention to a new energy source called eternal motive power. But even Remia, who was self-admitted as a bad student, knew one thing. Eternal motive power did not exist. However, before the world was destroyed, humans had placed all their hopes on eternal motive power. And the one in charge of this research was the world's largest company. This woman who had awakened from the underground secret room and called herself Gamma was the successor of this company. My father, Cicero, is the person with the highest achievements in the new energy source research. The research of the eternal motion has even reached a critical moment, and humanity is about to usher in a new life. Gamma sighed at this time. Until the night before the eternal motion was activated, my father suddenly told me that all of this was just a scam. A scam? Remia heard this and was slightly speechless. She muttered, "A lie. That's right. It's a lie to deceive the entire world." Gamma nodded lightly. Moreover, it's a lie that a small group of higher-ups wanted to buy time for themselves and stabilize all of humanity. Basically, there's no such thing as eternal motive power. The world has come to an end. There is no way for humans to save all of this. The only way for the world to be reborn is the purification function of the world itself. I can't resist my father's arrangement for me. He put me in a special hibernation chamber. When the world is reborn, I can wake up. There should be a group of people like me. Of course, the humans who could be preserved as seeds are all selected. And then, according to our research at that time, the world will experience several drastic changes. The land and sea will change, and then it will enter a long ice age. When all traces of humans are erased, new organisms will appear. Gamma sighed slowly, but we're not sure how long this time will be. But, Remia, you woke up earlier than me. You should know more about the outside world than I do. Can you share information with me? Remia opened her mouth. She was not the so-called survivor Gamma spoke of. But, of course, Gamma couldn't help but laugh at herself. I'm no longer the young miss of the company. I can't give you anything in return. But, for the sake of the same human. Remia was silent for a moment before she slowly said, I can't remember a lot of things about the past. I didn't wake up for long, about 3 or 4 weeks. After waking up, the first thing I met was... It's okay, Gamma said comfortingly. It will get better slowly. Before putting me into frozen dormancy, my father had already imagined the worst situation. See, tell me, are the seeds in your body still in a normal state? Z blinked. He was indifferent to Gamma's question and even revealed an inquiring gaze. The meaning is unclear. I can explain it more specifically. Gamma muttered, Z, how much do you know about yourself? I don't have any memories of when I was young. I thought for a moment and said, when I started to record my memories, I was only half of Remia's height. Gamma bit her nails. Perhaps there's a problem with your memory system. It's a pity that I don't have a suitable tool on hand, so I can't help you repair it for the time being. I said, you can find my memories from the past. As long as the chip in the memory center in the brain is not completely dead, it can be easily repaired. This is not a difficult thing. Gamma nodded and then smiled bitterly. I'm talking about before the destruction of civilization. Now, I don't know if I can find a suitable tool. What kind of tool? Z said quickly and then turned over his bag. Is there anything suitable here? A large pile of things was poured out in an instant. There were all kinds of strange things, and they were all small items. These were the treasures that Z had collected during his travels. This guy was like a rag picker. Remia glanced at them and lost interest in them. I need equipment, not these. Gamma pointed helplessly at the things in the secret room. I need a lot of machines like this to be able to take out some parts and put together what I need. I also need energy. Perhaps, if there's energy, this hibernation room can be modified. Okay, Z said directly. Let's start searching now. Gamma said, don't worry, you can't eat fatty in one bite. Actually, we need more people now. Perhaps I should wake up the other survivors. How many survivors are there? Remia suddenly asked. I don't know the specific name list. Gamma thought for a moment and said, but there should be some in this city. If possible, I want to go to the headquarters of the company. I should be able to find more useful things there. Perhaps the headquarters of the company can still operate. After all, there's an independent energy pool in the company. Energy pool? It's a semi-finished product of eternal motive power. Gamma thought for a moment and said, but didn't you say that eternal motive power is just a lie? Remia asked in confusion. Even if it's just a lie, I still need to give it my all. Gamma said with a complicated expression. In the end, who doesn't want a lie to come true? My father spent his entire life trying to realize this lie. If they're still alive, we just found a few of them, suddenly said. They seem to be heading towards the center of this city. Are there any survivors who have woken up? Gamma was a bit surprised. Z nodded. I'll take you to them. Walking on the snow-covered road was a very difficult thing to do. The snow in this ruined city wasn't very thick, but it was still almost up to their calves. Why is this broken place so big? How far have we walked? Yulia gasped for breath. The main reason was because she still had to carry Celia, so the situation was very bad. We can't keep walking. Madanzo frowned. We need to find a place to resist the cold. Otherwise, we'll freeze to death on the road. After coming to this place from the Wraith Realm, they didn't even have any clothes to resist the cold. There's a place over there that used to be a building. It shouldn't be a problem to block the wind. Yulia pointed at a certain spot in front of them. Very quickly, they climbed into the building through a broken window. The building was already tilted, and the main door was buried under the snow. From the looks of it, this looks like an office. Yulia quickly looked around. Something that can be used to start a fire. Something to start a fire? I got it. She hurriedly ran to a corner, took down a hanging painting, and knocked on it. This looks like it's made of wood, but I don't know how it was made. It hasn't rotted yet. It's a bit of a shame to burn it like this. It would be a real shame if we died in this place, Madanzo lightly said. Don't you want your beautiful world in the future? Come, senpai. It's time for me to show you the traditional art of starting a fire. Yulia immediately became spirited. She threw the hanging painting to the ground, then picked up the broken piece of wood. Madanzo picked up the paper inside the painting frame and looked at it. A landscape painting? Yulia moved closer to take a look. The main reason was that when she took it down, the mirror of the painting frame was already covered in dust, so she couldn't see the content at all. It's a portrait of a woman. It's quite pretty. Madanzo clicked her tongue and commented. Huh. Yulia couldn't help but blink. This looks like Miss Long? What Miss Long? Madanzo looked at Yulia in confusion, then pointed at a paragraph of text at the bottom of the painting. What's written here is Miss Gamma. All right? Gamma? Yulia couldn't help but open her mouth wide. Perhaps it's just similar, but it seems to be too similar. Chapter 2184. Madanzo rolled the paper into a ball and was about to use it to ignite the fire, but Yulia quickly snatched it away. She said, Maybe it can be used in the future. Besides, there's still a lot of things that can be burned here. It's not a big deal. Madanzo shrugged and didn't say anything for the time being. There was no problem in saying anything. The two of them spent a lot of effort to get a fire that could be considered vigorous. Then, they gathered together and began to warm themselves up. Their bodies were comfortably warm, and it was very relaxing. "Miss Long, who is it?" Madanzo asked suddenly. This Senior 11 was really clever. Feeling the comfortable feeling of Lai Yang on her body, she almost blurted it out. But Senior 11 didn't know about Miss Long's existence. She remembered the life lamps of many black souls in the Black Ark of the Covenant. She couldn't count how many black souls there were in the shop, and it was impossible for Miss Maid to make her remember carefully. Or Miss Long came into contact with the boss after Senior 11 left. So she didn't know. It seemed to be explainable. It's a customer in the shop. She thought for a moment and said slowly, "The relationship with the boss should be pretty good." "Should be? Don't care so much about the details," Senior Yulia said with a laugh. "Originally, whether the relationship between the customer and the boss is really good or not, it's not easy for us as employees to guess. I can't say that this Miss Long is the one who fought with our Black Soul's chief manager, Miss Maid for a man. It'll kill people. This Miss Long and Miss Gamma in the painting are very similar, right?" Madanzo said calmly. "I was wrong at first sight when I looked at you. It's a little similar." Senior Yulia also said calmly. "But if you look carefully, there are still some differences. Besides, how can the customer in subworld number 003 appear in the page world of the Book of Gaia? Moreover, the names don't match. It's probably just people who are similar. Although two identical leaves don't exist, two leaves with a high degree of similarity still exist." "No," Madanzo suddenly said. "There are two identical leaves. Why, as an onyx soul, you don't know? I feel like we're not talking about the same problem." Yulia frowned. "Senior, are you talking about the topic of unification?" Madanzo smiled faintly and said, "Black Soul is also unique." Yulia couldn't help but be startled. If Onyx Soul was the only one, then she was the only one? Then what about her real body in the void? Yulia subconsciously asked, "Senpai, can you explain it more clearly?" Metatro smiled and said, "Pray to me. If it's a sincere prayer, I'll be able to hear it and give you an answer." "What the hell? It's fine if you don't want to say it." Yulia shrugged. It was still a principle. As long as she didn't betray the boss, she could live. Whether she could live well or not was another matter, but she could definitely live for a long time. The longer she lived, the sooner she would know. She wouldn't put herself in a bad situation where she couldn't solve the problem at that time just because she was too curious about something. Believing in Senior 11? Just think about it. Wasn't the boss the only one Onyx Soul believed in? She had to continue to earn money and was determined not to be a traitor. By the way, is there any movement from Book of Gaia? She changed to another topic. "We have been here for some time. Will Morgan secretly chase after us?" "I don't know." Madanzo shook her head and then frowned. "There's a bug on your shoulder." "Bug?" Yulia was startled and subconsciously looked at her shoulder. She saw a gray bug the size of a thumb on her shoulder. It looked like a firefly, but emitted a weak red light. She wasn't afraid of bugs, but she had some kind of fear for this strange bug. Without saying anything, she waved her hand and slapped the bug to the ground and stomped it to death. At this moment, Madanzo grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Let's go. Let's go." Yulia subconsciously looked up. She saw that the walls of the room, the ceiling, everywhere was densely covered with these grayish-black-red light bugs. The red fluorescence on the bug's tail was like a bright red eye. Do we fall into a bug's nest? Maybe it's phototaxis, or maybe it's because of the temperature of the fire. In short, falling into the hands of these guys definitely won't end well. With that, Madanzo kicked the fire away, and the sparks instantly scattered all over the room. At this time, the strange bugs rushed into the sparks and extinguished them. Yulia quickly carried Celia on her back and quickly climbed out of the window with Madanzo. They hurriedly escaped to the street. At this time, the sky was already dark, and it seemed that it was going to be night soon. The woman who called herself Gamma didn't seem to be surprised by the existence of Taramaru, although during this period of time, Remia had also accepted the existence of a big talking toad. But it took her a long time to get used to it. This woman always gave Remia a feeling that she wasn't telling the truth. At this time, they were riding on Taramaru's back, quickly passing through the streets of the ruined city, looking for the mark left by the bluebird. Ever since Gamma left the underground secret room, she kept looking at the situation of the ruined city. Her eyes gradually became disappointed. Looking at the situation, the long winter that we predicted at that time was just the beginning. Gamma sighed. I didn't wake up at the beginning of the recovery stage as scheduled, but I woke up early. How does this affect you? I thought for a while and asked. If the world is going to enter a frozen period, it's not suitable for human survival at all. Gamma thought for a while and said, even if this awakens the survivors, it's meaningless. In short, I need to confirm the survivors' situation first. At this time, a bluebird flew over and landed directly on Nest's shoulder. Those people mistakenly entered the nest of the red fire ladybugs, and now they are running in the direction of the station square. Are you sure it's the station square? The direction is in that direction, but who knows if they will run somewhere else in the middle? Besides, it's going to be dark soon. Qing Tian said that she wanted to go to the station and should still be there. You go first and let Qing Tian and Cat stop them. Before nightfall, you must hide well. Okay. The little blue bird flapped its wings and took off. At the same time, the patted Taramaru's head and saw Taramaru jump directly. The powerful jumping force allowed it to jump directly onto a broken building that was more than 10 meters high. What is the red fire ladybug? Gamma suddenly asked at this time. Z said, it's a kind of insect monster that is very troublesome as long as you encounter it. Monster? Gamma frowned. Z nodded and said, in this world, as long as it's night, it's time for monsters to walk. They have all kinds of shapes, strength, speed, and are very sensitive to sounds and smells. Gamma was puzzled. After the destruction of civilization, it should have experienced several catastrophes before entering the current cold period. Is it because of the catastrophes that caused the mutation? How long have I been dormant? Anyway, it's like this. Z said casually, before we met you, we met a monster Christmas tree yesterday. It's also the first time we met. Christmas tree? Gamma was startled. Where? The station square. At this time, Gamma became silent. But at this time, he took out a thick roll of thick skin from Taramaru's backpack and covered Gamma's body. He also gave another roll to Remia. Remia happily thanked him. Taramaru leaped forward, and the cold wind that blew was bone-chilling. But Gamma seemed to be in a daze. She stared blankly at his face, not knowing what she was thinking. After a while, she said coldly, you shouldn't be so nice to people. Remia was stunned. Z couldn't help but blink in confusion. Why? Don't ask. Gamma shook her head. After a moment of silence, she said expressionlessly, take it as an order. Z still blinked, as if he was thinking. He shook his head gently, as if in a daze. His voice became stiff as he said slowly, the reason is not sufficient. The order cannot be executed. He quickly returned to his original spirited state. Then it's up to you. However, Gamma snorted softly, as if he was a little angry. He simply closed his eyes and wrapped himself tightly with animal skin. Remia saw all of this. She just quietly hid behind them. Taramaru jumped very fast. Soon, Remia could vaguely see the ruins of the station square. Like locusts passing by, behind them, there was a black mass of strange insects. They could bite stones into pieces in an instant. Senpai, should we come back to this world in the future? Yulia, who was panting, quickly said, why don't we hide in another page world first? It seemed that this was the only way. But at this time, a small fireball suddenly appeared in the sky. The fireball directly surrendered to a corner of the street and exploded. The sound was particularly loud in the quiet street, but at the same time, it attracted the strange insects. But this obviously didn't last long. At this time, small fireballs appeared one after another. They were thrown into the distance, attracting the strange insects again and again. Madanzo looked in the direction of the fireball and saw a figure standing on a half-collapsed building. It was a figure holding a Molotov cocktail. Qingtian doll, Qingtian leader. Yulia had sharp eyes and immediately recognized the Qingtian doll that Madanzo was talking about. She was pleasantly surprised. Counting the previous 2 worlds, this was the 3rd time that she met Qingtian. She always felt that this Qingtian doll was really her lucky charm. She wondered what kind of role Qingtian was in this world. Do you know it? Madanzo quickly asked. It seems to be a fixed character that appears in every page world. At least, it's in the 3 worlds that I've met so far. Yulia quickly said, let's not talk about this first. It seems to be hinting us to run over there. Let's run over there first? Okay. The 2 took Celine and quickly went to another street under the guidance of the figure upstairs. They temporarily got rid of the strange insect's pursuit. After moving forward for a while, they stopped. Let me introduce myself. I'm Qingtian, and I'm currently looking for a way to become a human. The Qingtian doll in front of them introduced herself politely. Yulia, a girl who is working hard to debut. Madanzo, my goal is to fight back to the palace of blazing heaven and beat up the group of little brothers inside. Qingtian blinked. What a great dream. I like to get to know people with great dreams. But it's getting dark, and the monsters will be more active. Please follow me. 2, 3 people with great dreams? She's asleep, Madanzo suddenly said. I'm still looking for a way to wake her up. Qingtian didn't ask more and said directly, please follow me. Without a word along the way, Fersky walked in front to lead the way. On the way, a little blue bird flew to Qingtian's shoulder and looked back at Madanzo and Yulia from time to time. This talking bird? Madanzo asked in a low voice. Don't ever provoke this bird, senior sister, Yulia said in a serious tone. She even rubbed her forehead. Not long after, they came to a collapsed station square and went in through a tunnel. They saw the giant Christmas tree that had been half broken. This Christmas tree was a terrifying monster yesterday. It can release some powder from its robe, which can make people hallucinate and attack it. The bones here are its trophies. This, Madanzo looked up and said thoughtfully, maybe it's because of this Christmas tree that the demonic wolves outside the city don't dare to come close. He shook his head. He couldn't be sure. However, Yulia was attracted by a red light. It was a red cocoon wrapped around the roots of the Christmas tree. This thing is buried under the roots of the Christmas tree, and we don't know what it is. You better not get too close. At this time, Mr. Fersky stopped Yulia and said, then before my companions come back, let's have a good talk first. Yulia pointed at the red cocoon and said, there seems to be a person inside. There's indeed a girl inside. Qingtian nodded. Okay, let's talk in detail. Hey, Senior 11, come take a look. I'm coming. Excuse me, where are you from? Did you let's talk in detail? Can you see the girl's appearance clearly? Senior? It's a bit blurry, but let's talk. I'll wipe it. Maybe I can see more clearly. Senior, go to the side and take a look. I can't see her face clearly. She's curled up. Okay, I'll wipe it here too. Chat. F***CK. Isn't this the little fairy of the sacred mountain? Yulia exclaimed. This is Yachan? Madanzo couldn't help but frown. Then he looked at her, and she looked at him. Qingtian sighed and wanted to say something, but he didn't want to talk anymore. He threw out a Molotov cocktail, and it exploded, causing the 2 to look at him subconsciously. Qingtian lit another Molotov cocktail and raised it. Talk. Yulia coughed lightly without saying anything. Senior, I think you were too rude just now. How can you ignore him? Moreover, he's our savior. Oh, your shamelessness reminds me of when I was young. Newbie. Madanzo put on a smile and walked toward Qing eagerly. Come, Big Pot, let's talk. Chapter 2185. Z, are you there? Where are you? This was the place where they spent the night last night, but Kez didn't find any of his companions. He didn't see Z and his companions on the way back from the station square. He stood on the street blankly, not knowing what to do next. Kaz! 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 There seemed to be someone shouting its name at the corner. Who's calling me? It was not the voice of any of its companions that it was familiar with, but it was a voice that knew its name. Kaz cautiously walked over and took out a Molotov cocktail from the opening of its breastplate. See, wasn't the only one who liked to throw Molotov cocktails. He was addicted to it as well. Whoever threw it would know. Kaz, come here to me. Who is it? It suddenly sped up and ran into the alley at the corner. At the end of the dark alley, a faint blue figure appeared. The Molotov cocktail in his hand fell to the ground, and Kaz walked into the alley step by step. So, you don't know the truth about the destruction of this world, right? Madanzo sat on the ground with his legs crossed. He rested his chin on his hand and pondered. After a simple conversation, he had a general understanding of the current situation. How much do you know about this city? Yulia asked suddenly. Qing Tian shook his head and said, This city is huge. We haven't explored much of it. I'm afraid that we've only explored a small area. What's wrong? Is there anything strange about this city? Madanzo shook his head and said directly, We're searching for the truth, so we've been traveling. So, we'll pay attention to anything strange. Qing Tian nodded and expressed his understanding. It was at this moment that a huge toad jumped in from high above. The moment it landed, the stones on the ground slightly bounced a few times. There were a few people on the toad. Yulia's gaze became focused and almost blurted out boss, but as soon as the words left her mouth, she stopped. She silently glanced at 11 Senior Madanzo. She saw that although Madanzo also appeared surprised, there wasn't anything else. This senior doesn't seem to know the boss. She silently whispered into Madanzo's ear. The man on the toad has also appeared in other worlds. Madanzo nodded. In the Wraith realm, he was Little Ya's older brother. Although he's now an adult, it's still easy to recognize him. It seems we've found the protagonist of this page world. Yulia is the woman next to her. Is she the woman depicted in the painting? I think so. Gamma, Senior Yulia nodded. She really didn't know that this was the boss appearance, or did she purposely not recognize him? Yulia continued without changing her expression. Senior, it seems we're starting to gain something in this world as well. Let's observe the situation first, Madanzo reminded her. Z, you're finally here. Qing Tian greeted him. Bluebird came to inform me ahead of time, so I followed your instructions and brought these strangers here. Where's Kaz? I didn't see him on the way here. See, he shook his head. Is he not here? I found something here, so I had Kaz inform you. It seems I didn't run into him. Qington, Mr. Fairsky, was stunned for a moment and then shook his head. It's almost night. Kaz will probably find a place to hide first. Don't worry too much. Maybe Kaz will return here if he can't find you. See, nodded and patted Terangru's head, signaling him to slowly put down the person he was carrying. Yulia Sr. Are you Yulia Sr.? At this moment, Remia quickly jumped down from Terangru's back and walked toward Madanzo. The girl even had a hint of excitement on her face. She was even more excited when she arrived in front of her senior. There's Miss Selion. That's great. You seem to be. Yulia blinked. She had seen this girl before. You're called Remia, right? You have an older brother called Dasher. It wasn't just at the Holy Maiden's venue, but earlier at the bus plaza outside Freedom City's airport. Yulia Sr., you actually know my name. Remia looked surprised. You even know Dasher? Yulia said calmly. I've seen the information on the waiting list. It's all written there. That's still very impressive. You can remember it just by looking at it. Remia sighed. As expected of the fourth place of the last competition. Well said, ah. Yulia changed the topic. By the way, how did you get here, and how did you meet them? Remia suddenly said in a low voice. Yulia Sr., it's a bit complicated. I'll find a suitable time to tell you. Also, if that woman asks you anything later, just say that you've forgotten a lot of things and that you woke up in a basement, okay? Who's that woman? Yulia asked quickly. Gamma. She claims to be a survivor of the world before it was destroyed. She was frozen and dormant. We just woke her up. Okay, let's not talk about it first. They've all noticed us. The walked over slowly. As for Gamma, she was still wearing the animal skin and slowly followed behind him. "This is Eulia Sr.," Remia quickly said. "I remember her. She used to be a senior who went to school with me. Other than that, I can't remember a lot of things. I just asked. Eulia Sr.'s situation is similar. She said that she woke up in a basement similar to Miss Gamma." Gamma looked at Eulia Sr. suspiciously. After a while, she looked at Madanzo and frowned. "Are you a man?" Madanzo blinked, but suddenly shook her head. Gamma frowned even deeper. "What do you mean?" "I don't have a gender," Madanzo said very calmly. Gamma did not seem satisfied with this answer, and asked again, "No gender? Do both sexes exist at the same time? Or?" "At the same time, they don't exist," Madanzo said frankly. "If you want to say it, you can be considered a person without sex." Gamma nodded. Although there was still confusion on her face, she did not continue to ask. After asking about Celia's situation, she thought for a while and said, "Maybe it's because the hibernation time is too long, or because the hibernation chamber malfunctioned, causing the brain to upgrade and receive damage. But as long as you're not dead, you can still be saved. The two of you, do you still remember where you woke up?" Eulia Sr. had long entered the role of Remia. She even maintained a trace of vigilance against Gamma, hesitating. "I'm sorry, I don't know. This world is frozen and turned into ruins. It's impossible to distinguish. I have a rough idea of the situation." Gamma nodded, and then suddenly hugged Eulia Sr. in her arms and said softly, "It must be very painful for a person to wake up and lose most of their memories. But please square, everything will be fine, because we still have hope." These comforting words, Eulia Sr. only felt goosebumps but did not resist. The main reason was that this Gamma was really too much like a certain Kelowna Shinryu. No matter how good her acting was, she still felt like she was out of play. Even so, Miss Gamma unexpectedly had the temperament of a leader. Or was it the role of a very important big sister? After Gamma released Eulia, she looked at Madanzo. Madanzo showed a bright smile, her hands slightly open, as if waiting for the next hug. "You forget it," Gamma said indifferently. "Before I figure out your situation, I will only retain your most basic rights as a human being. That's all." "Miss Gamma, do you know what this red cocoon is?" Mr. Chinton suddenly asked. It had already known the general situation from Bluebird's mouth in advance, and understood that Miss Gamma was a survivor before the destruction of civilization. Hearing this, Gamma looked at the root of the Christmas tree monster with a dignified expression. She slowly approached the big cocoon and sighed. "Sure enough, it's this kind of thing. What is it?" The crowd approached. Miss Gamma's face was bitter. "Eternal power. What?" The crowd could not help but look at the young lady, the heir of the world's largest enterprise before the destruction of civilization, with a face of disbelief. To be exact, it's just a prototype of eternal power, a semi-finished product. Gamma's voice slowly sounded. "At the beginning, my father, Dr. Cicero, found a baby girl in an ancient monument. Father brought the baby girl back, took good care of her, and let the baby girl grow up. My sister, father named her Gaia. Why was it sealed inside?" This is the voice of Z. At this time, he is standing in front of the red cocoon. His palm is on the big cocoon, and his eyes are always on the girl in the cocoon. "Why do you want to trap her?" "She is Gaia, but she's not the real Gaia." Gamma shook her head at this time. "She is just a replica of the genetic material extracted from Gaia. The replica has no thoughts, but simply has similar characteristics to Gaia, so it is not an exaggeration to say that it is a puppet." Everyone looked at Gamma. Gamma said with a wry smile, "Let me tell you a story that happened a long time ago. Many, many years ago, a baby girl grew up from the ruins and became a girl. On the day of her 14th birthday, the girl suddenly awakened some kind of wonderful ability. She could synthesize any matter out of thin air, anything but any matter that was known to exist. The girl could easily create it. When the world was in a state of resource exhaustion, and mankind was about to enter the stage of destruction, this girl was like a god born to deal with the disaster. It was just that the girl's adoptive father did not disclose this secret to the public out of protection for the girl. However, just like there was no wall in the world that did not leak, the secret was known by the only emperor in the world after all. The girl's adoptive father was the emperor's younger brother. In the face of the survival of the empire and mankind, the girl's adoptive father had to start the research of the girl's godlike ability. The girl's adoptive father was indeed the best research institute in the world. The experiment quickly had a breakthrough result. However, with the development of the experiment, the girl's physical condition was constantly deteriorating. She was just a girl in the prime of her life, but her physical condition was comparable to that of a dying old man. In order to continue the experiment, under the emperor's instructions, the adoptive father began to extract the girl's genetic material and cultivate a replica of the girl to carry out more in-depth research. Because of the appearance of the replica, the experiment once again had a breakthrough development. The ability of the replica, although far inferior to the girl's own, was better in mass production. Mankind had tried the sweet fruit at the end of science. The world that was about to be destroyed seemed to have a new life again. But soon, mankind also tried the punishment of God from the end of science. After the large-scale application of the pseudo-eternal power, mankind began to lose the ability to reproduce on a large scale. This loss was not only physiological, but also seemed to be prohibited from the rules. The replicas of the girl, created by mankind through cultivation, all died within a day. The world that lost God finally ushered in the end of civilization. This is the evil result that we planted ourselves, and also Gaia's punishment for us. Miss Gamma sighed slowly. Later we understood that the short years of using eternal power was just a short glory in exchange for the future of all mankind. We have overdrawn our future, and naturally, there is no future. At this time, senior sister, Yulia, said rationally, things have already come to that point. If sacrificing one person can save everyone, there won't be a problem of choice, right? Of course, if the person who is going to be sacrificed is me, I will resist anyway. Gaia, Miss Gamma said faintly. From the beginning, she didn't intend to resist. That punishment? Madanzo frowned. Gamma said, it's her godlike power. It's that power that laughs at our human overconfidence and our violation of the forbidden area of God. Bang! Suddenly, a loud noise sounded, and everyone was shocked. At this time, Z stood in front of the red cocoon, and his fist was directly printed in the big cocoon. After the loud noise, a crack appeared on the big cocoon, and then the big cocoon burst. They looked at him, but he didn't say a word. After the big cocoon broke, the girl fell to the ground and picked her up. However, when he picked up the girl's body directly turned into dust and disappeared from his hands. Why? Z whispered softly, looking at the dust left in the palm. Will be so uncomfortable. Chapter 2186. In the silence, Gamma slowly walked towards him. She was saying in a very gentle voice in front of us, these replicas are just tools. Maybe death is the best place for them to belong. Z looked at her blankly. She sighed softly. No matter what, Gaia is my sister who grew up with me. How do you know that I didn't resist at the beginning? Z was a little touched. He nodded, but he was more silent. Suddenly, he seemed to have found something to do. So he said directly, are there many such eternal power in the world? Gamma shook her head and said, at that time, humans were indeed using it on a large scale. But the eternal power made by replicas has a limit. Once its power is exhausted, the situation just now will happen. It's been so many years, and I don't know how much is left. I think the reason why this Christmas tree is demonized is probably because of the influence of eternal power. I will find them all, Z said seriously. This is a long process. Gamma stroked his face at this time. Don't worry, I will accompany you until you finish this. He seemed hesitant, but he nodded. Thank you. Gamma just looked at him with a smile. Yulia squinted her eyes and pretended not to see this scene. Fortunately, the maid was not in this page world. Otherwise, the world would not be broken. She shook her head and whispered to Madanzo, Senior, it seems that the main line of this page world is to find all the eternal power in order to clear the level, right? How long will it take? Madanzo said indifferently. Morgan must have had the Book of Gaia for a long time, but so far he has not collected all the pages. I think it's not particularly difficult to have no clue. I'm afraid it's just the kind that takes too long. No wonder she said that destruction is faster than the strategy. Yulia muttered. Remia seemed to be carefully listening to the conversation here. Yulia immediately stopped the topic and even waved her hand, motioning Remia to come to her side. Senior? Yulia quickly said, We don't know everything here for the time being, so remember not to easily reveal that we are from the kingdom of holy light. If there is a situation, we will cover each other. Remia nodded obediently. At this time, Gamma suddenly said, Everyone, there is an exclusive track in this underground station that leads to an experimental field of my father's. There may be some useful resources. Experimental field? Everyone was surprised. Jiaoma nodded and said, That place is buried deep underground. Maybe it can withstand a few catastrophes, but I'm not sure if it is still there or not. I'm going to take a look. As for you all, you can decide for yourselves. After all, I don't know if there will be any danger there. There's no harm in taking a look. Z said directly, There may also be her there. This train is not the one before. Once again, they came to the sealed train filled with corpses. This is the exclusive train from the experimental field. Gamma looked through the window for a moment before frowning. It seems that the people inside are ordinary employees of the company, but why did they all die inside? He thought for a moment and said, We speculate that they may have inhaled some kind of fatal gas at the same time. Looking at their appearance before they died, it seemed that they had difficulty breathing. Gas. Gamma pondered for a while, but he couldn't think of an answer. He quickly pointed in the direction of the train. If we go back from here, we should be able to reach the station of the experimental field headquarters. It's about 15 kilometers away. We'll be there soon. Normal people could travel 5 to 6 kilometers in an hour. 15 kilometers wasn't a long distance, and it was in this wasteland where they could only rely on human power. Although it was already night, the time when monsters were active, the underground track was originally a dim environment, so there was no distinction between day and night. Therefore, the difficulty in front of them was not the journey, but the monsters that could appear at any time. Maybe we can wait until daytime and go on the ground? Yulia thought for a moment and said, I'm afraid not. Gamma shook her head. Before coming to the station square, I roughly observed the nearby terrain. The entrances on the ground are probably buried under stones and snow. Then let's go. Z nodded. I'll walk in front. If there's any danger, I'll tell you immediately. Z, it's you. Farsky suddenly shouted. Z shook her head gently, then turned and walked into the depths of the underground track. Wait a minute. Gamma also said, I'll go to the train to get something. After a while, Gamma walked out of the train again. At this time, Gamma's body was full of weapons. She looked like a mercenary walking on a battlefield. Madanzo blinked. Human firearms, good heavens. A company special car is usually equipped with an emergency room. Gamma quickly said at this time, There's only so much left, but it's better than empty-handed. Maybe because she was also a survivor, Yulia was quickly given a short shotgun-like thing. Why are there so many weapons on a train? Before the collapse, the lie of eternal motivation often couldn't stop the fear of the people. Gamma sighed and said, At that time, the environment was very bad. The peaceful world had already collapsed, and only evil was left. The company did this just to protect itself. Yulia nodded. She still had a question, but she didn't ask. The question was, Have you ever killed anyone? This seemed to be a question. Even if you didn't ask, you would know the answer. There are not many bullets. Unless it's necessary, use them sparingly. Let's go. Gamma's voice slowly sounded in the tunnel. Unexpectedly, they didn't encounter any danger along the way. Even though they were very nervous along the way, it seemed to be a false alarm. This even made Yulia began to feel that her luck was changing. Perhaps, as long as she followed boss, good things would happen. Even if this was just a image? No, 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 no. What are you muttering? Madanzo's voice suddenly appeared. Yulia said with a sincere face, believe in the boss, and you will live forever. Madanzo's face was strange, but she was probably used to the other's jumping thoughts. At this time, she just shook her head gently. Be careful. Something happened. Senior sister, Yulia, instantly frowned, and she asked in an even lower voice, what did you find? Madanzo said, I'm just used to attributing everything to coincidences. It's not necessarily a good thing if it's too smooth. Senior sister, Yulia, blinked and sized up this senior, as if she was getting to know him again. Senior, 11, don't tell me you're the type who lacks a sense of security? Yes, you have to protect me, newcomer. I'm just a child. I feel like I've been defeated. Yulia shook her head. When the senior was shameless, the newcomer really couldn't do anything. But along the way, there was indeed no danger. Those monsters entrenched in the ruined city didn't seem to use this place as a nest. 3 hours later, the group came to a huge station. Here, they found a large number of trains that hadn't been sent out yet. Some of the trains were fully loaded. Just like the train that was discovered earlier, it was also full of corpses. There were even some that had collapsed on the platform of the train station, but they had already turned into skeletons. The cold air on the ground had also invaded here. There was even a thin layer of frost on the floor. These people seemed to be in a hurry to escape at the same time. Here, it seems that something terrible has happened. It seemed that only the gamma of the young lady could give the answer. But when faced with the eyes of the crowd, the young lady only showed a bitter smile. I'm afraid this happened after I went into hibernation. I don't know either. Z nodded and then said directly, Here, how do we get in? Gamma was stunned. You believe me? Z said indifferently. It makes sense logically. After all, we found you in the vault of the bank. Logically speaking, if your father is the owner of the company, he wants to put you into hibernation. Why not put you in a place with a higher safety factor, such as this experimental field, but choose that place, where it's not safe here anymore? Following his train of thought, Mr. Chington said, or there's something here that your father doesn't want you to find out. Looking at the situation here, it seems to be the former. Gamma didn't speak. She just walked to a gate on the platform. She wiped the screen next to the gate. Immediately, her eyes flashed with joy. She directly pressed her palm on the screen. The screen suddenly flashed. Here, there's still power. The sound of surprise attracted the crowd. Under the operation of Gamma, the gate was slowly opening. The jump was a little slow, but it was obviously still usable. How long has it been in the world? And this place can still operate. Gamma said, This is my father's painstaking effort. He spent his whole life building it. At the bottom, there is a reaction pool, which is one of the few reaction pools of human beings. I guess the laboratory was closed at that time, and the management system went directly into standby mode. But after all, it's been a long time. There's not much energy left. She took the lead and walked into the gate. After seeing that there was no danger, everyone followed one by one. Inside was a passage for ascending and descending. The passage sank slowly, making a rumbling sound. How deep is it? Metatro looked at the environment inside and looked at Gamma at the same time. 100 meters underground. Gamma said casually. Madanzo suddenly frowned. What'd you just press? It's just the start button. Gamma said calmly. Don't worry. You are the surviving human beings. I won't hurt you. After all, maybe we're the only ones left. What did you press? Madanzo ignored it, looked straight at Gamma, and even approached him and said in a deep voice, Get out of the way. He even pushed Gamma away forcefully. At the same time, a lot of white mist suddenly erupted from the wall of the elevator. Madanzo was sprayed directly in the face and instantly dizzy. He shook his head hard, only to be more dizzy. Then a few thumps sounded, which was the sound of falling to the ground. Madanzo slid to the ground. Don't worry, it's all right. This is just a necessary confidentiality procedure. All he could see was Gamma, still standing normally. And what are you going to do? Z frowned and subconsciously grabbed Miss Gamma's wrist. Miss Gamma reached out and put her hand on the heart of Z. I won't hurt you, but please sleep a little. My prince. His heart suddenly trembled. Z opened his mouth, but his eyes gradually lost their light. Soon he lowered his head. They woke up in a pure white room. It was a very simple room. Except for the bed, there was nothing else. Yulia, senior sister, was the first to wake up, and then Remia. There were only two of them in the room at this time. The door of the room could not be opened. They had been trapped here for some time. Then suddenly, a corner of the wall opened, and then some sealed food and drinking water were sent in. But Yulia, senior sister, still suggested not to touch anything here for the time being. Senior sister, what should we do? Remia asked worriedly. Can we still leave this, senior sister? Yulia quickly covered Remia's mouth, and her eyes indicated that she should not mention any change of topic about the kingdom of holy light. Could it be outside? Can be heard outside? Yulia, senior sister, said indifferently. It's always good to be careful. After a while, the wall moved away again, and then a screen slowly pushed out. The screen lit up, and it was Miss Gamma. Miss Gamma seemed to be in a room full of instruments at this time. She had also changed into a white robe. Neither of them spoke, just stared at the screen nervously. Miss Gamma looked at it and said, "Those things are not poisonous, and they contain high protein, which is very suitable for supplementing nutrition. Next, I will also configure this food for you." You, why did you bring us here? Senior sister, Yulia asked calmly. For the continuation of civilization. Miss Gamma said slowly, "You are a very important mother. So, I will take good care of your body." The two looked at each other at this time. Yulia, senior sister, shivered and said subconsciously, "Mother, what do you mean? There are not many survivors." Miss Gamma was silent for a moment before she slowly said, "The only criterion for selecting survivors is, it must be a woman who still has the ability to naturally conceive. Although I didn't find your information in the system library, I have checked that you also have this ability." Senior sister, Yulia, was stunned. Then, she mischievously pointed at Remia and said, "How do we reproduce?" "Don't worry, there's still seeds." Miss Gamma said indifferently, "When you are done, I will let it come to you. It was created for this reason." In an instant, Yulia, senior sister's face turned pale, and she shouted, "Fuck, why don't you just kill me?" Chapter 2187. As the only survivor in the world, Miss Gamma, for the sake of the continuation of mankind, obviously will not be ruthless to the butcher knife and really kill Yulia, senior sister. But she still felt as if there was a butcher's knife hanging over her head. Someone will die, okay. This was obviously Miss Gamma's territory. As the eldest daughter of the company, this experimental field that could still be used was like her back garden. Senior, Yulia, asked herself that she had no ability to resist at all. For the time being, it seemed that there was none. No matter what, you have to struggle. Even if things really get to the worst, you have to try your best to pretend that you have tried your best to resist. Suicide is obviously impossible, not in this life. Senior, Yulia, was rubbing her bangs on her forehead. "Yeah, mate? No, don't. No. Please don't do this. Please, lighter?" "Bah, senior sister." At this time, Remia was hiding in the corner in fear, looking at him in bewilderment. "It's just a preview of what might happen. Don't mind it." Senior, Yulia, waved her hand casually. "Why don't you prepare as well?" That kind of thing, it's impossible to prepare." Remia couldn't help but laugh bitterly. But it seemed that after such a commotion, her mood was slightly relaxed. It should be said that she was worthy of being the fourth place of the last holy maiden. Even in such a terrible environment, she still didn't forget to appease the people around her. Her light was shining like a holy light. Remia couldn't help but be a little absent-minded at this time. Senior sister." The girl took a deep breath at this time, gritted her teeth, and said, If you really want to do something, I will definitely go in front of you first." Senior, Yulia, couldn't help but be stunned and subconsciously said, "This is not a question of whether to go first or not. The point is, you can't stand it all, okay?" Who could withstand the anger of Miss Maid if they played such a big game. At this moment, the girl's face suddenly turned slightly red. She lowered her head and said in a mosquito-like voice, should be able to feel something like that. Yulia was an old prostitute. How could she not understand that the two people were not talking about the same thing? She couldn't help but shake her head. Thinking that every second she could delay was a second, she nodded and said, "Okay, you go first." Senior sister, at this moment, the door of the room suddenly moved and opened. A chill instantly poured in from the opening of the door, and the two of them inexplicably shivered. So fast? Remia couldn't help but be shocked. I don't think so. Yulia shook her head. Judging from the situation, they're trying to get us to leave. The lights in the corridor are on, so they're probably telling us to go this way. After saying this, senior schoolmate, Yulia, walked in the opposite direction of the corridor lights. However, before she could take 2 steps, an iron gate suddenly fell down from the corridor, almost touching her nose as it fell. Senior sister blinked, then shrugged and walked towards the light in the corridor. Wait for me, Yulia. Remember to bring the toothpaste tubes in the room. I'm not full yet." She immediately turned around and said. According to the guidance, after a long metal passage, 2 days later, they came to a larger room. The room had 2 floors. The inner floor was like a laboratory, and Miss Gamma was standing on the outer table at this time, manipulating something. Yulia looked at the inner laboratory and suddenly found that Madanzo, Chinton, Toad Tumuru, and Bluebird were all trapped inside at this time. And Z was also in the inner room, but it was released alone. They were all sealed in huge glass cylinders and didn't seem to wake up yet. "You're here." Miss Gamma didn't look back, but said indifferently, 30 seconds slower than expected. Senior schoolmate, Yulia, didn't care about these things. She frowned and said, "What do you want to do with them?" "Just a little research." Miss Gamma slowly turned around, leaned directly on the control, crossed her arms, and said indifferently, "After all, I also want to know if these guys' bodies have adapted to the environment of the world at this time, and if they will have bacteria that are harmful to humans." "Oh, don't worry. I've already disinfected you." Madanzo is also a survivor. Senior schoolmate, Yulia, frowned again. "Indeed, but it's a little special." Miss Gamma said, "I've checked. This guy really has no gender. It's a very rare type. I don't even know for the time being whether it's some kind of evolution or degeneration. Maybe I'll cut it open for research. As for what you said, Madanzo is also a survivor. It's up for debate. After all, I didn't find any information about it in the survivors database. Of course, neither did you." Hearing this, the two of them couldn't help but change their faces slightly. "Don't worry," Miss Gamma said indifferently. "I said, even if I didn't find your information in the database, it didn't matter. After all, the world had gone completely crazy on the eve of the collapse of civilization. In this case, it's not impossible for extra people to hide in the survival cabin. Besides, you haven't lost your fertility, which is enough for me." "I'm grateful directly." Senior schoolmate, Yulia, smiled bitterly. Miss Gamma suddenly waved her hand. "Come here." With the wave of her hand, the safety of the two seemed to distort a little and then return to normal. Senior schoolmate, Yulia, was shocked. If she had rushed directly to this woman just now, the consequences would probably not have been good. With a trace of vigilance, she took the lead in front of Miss Gamma. I saw that the console opened a drawer at this time, and Miss Gamma took out 2 books from it and handed them to the two of them. What is this?" "Baby magazine," Miss Gamma said seriously. "All the photos of the healthiest and best-looking babies are included here. From now on, you have to keep looking. It's best to be able to imagine it clearly with your eyes closed. What you have to test. In addition, when you are successfully pregnant, I will also prepare a series of prenatal education courses for you. It will be very busy. I hope you're mentally prepared." "What's the use of this?" Remia said subconsciously. Research has shown that parents' expectations for their children can affect their children's development in their mother's womb. Miss Gamma said naturally, "Since we want to continue the fire of human beings, we naturally have to create excellent varieties." Senior schoolmate, Yulia didn't know where to start, so she had to say, since you have reached the level of being able to replicate human beings by extracting genetic material, genetic adjustment won't be difficult, right? The main thing is to have an exam. That's too much. As I said, any means other than natural growth will be punished. Miss Gamma shook her head and said, if not, those of us who still have the ability to naturally conceive would not have survived. It can't be you also. Senior schoolmate, Yulia, opened her mouth, and her expression suddenly became a little strange. I'm also one of the survivors. Of course, I will also shoulder the mission of continuing human beings. Miss Gamma shrugged. Naturally, I will also accept pregnancy. With that, Miss Gamma suddenly turned her head and looked at in the layer room. There seemed to be an unnatural expression on her face, but quickly disappeared. She only heard her indifferently say, at present, the only source of seed supply is But don't worry, although it's shared, you don't have any psychological burden. After all, this is only the obligation of survivors. There are no emotional factors involved, and we won't use any sisters or anything like that. Shared. That's so explosive. Senior schoolmate, Yulia, cried out in her heart again. She had even lost the ability to think. This world is good for boss. At this moment, Remia suddenly felt a little uneasy. She pinched the corner of her clothes and said in a trembling voice, I heard, if you want that, you need two people together. Together. But he is not. It seems that you already know something or remember something. Miss Gamma said with a chuckle. Remia nodded and whispered, once again, I accidentally saw Z. Replenishing energy. His body is like a machine? Senior schoolmate, Yulia, couldn't help but widen her eyes again. Miss Gamma said, to be precise, it's a robot. Yes, most of his body has been modified, but there are also a small number of human characteristics, especially the organs that provide seeds, which are specially modified. Yes, humans were punished and began to lose the ability to reproduce on a large scale. This loss, first of all, began with men and was out of control. At the end of the world, only the seed of a boy was left, and it could still maintain a certain degree of activity. Z? Miss Gamma nodded. However, he was originally a human being. We didn't know how long his ability would last, so we thought of a way to seal his seed, put it in a specific container, and then transform his body bionically. Then there was the Z series. Senior schoolmate, Yulia, was stunned. Is there a lot of Z? A total of 100 Z series have been made, which is our limit. Miss Gamma nodded and said, however, only one of these 100 is the main body. It seems that we are lucky to have met this should be the main body. In fact, this Z still has a certain metabolic ability. It will grow and age like a human being, but this speed is very slow. You don't know yet. According to the data extracted from the chip in this brain, he has been awake for more than 100 years. More than 100 years. Remia subconsciously looked at the sleeping face in the room. In other words, he has been, yes. Miss Gamma sighed softly and looked at it. All along, I've been traveling alone in this empty world. As for the other strange fellows, I've only met them in recent years. It's amazing to be able to give birth to such a creature. Remia subconsciously looked at senior schoolmate Yulia and found that she was silent at the moment. Probably she needed time to digest all this. So did she. Miss Gamma didn't talk too much with the two of them this time. Finally, she just said, your memories are true. My instruments can't detect the source of the problem for the time being. However, the problem of the brain has always been very mysterious. I will show you the information before the destruction of civilization and stimulate your memory center. Maybe it will help. During this period of time, the most important task for all of you is to take care of your own body. Just follow the schedule that I made for you. In addition, you can move freely in the areas with lights. Otherwise, you are forbidden to enter. Any other questions? Senior schoolmate, Yulia, shook her head. As long as it's not now, there's no problem. Remia, let's go back first. I'm a little tired, she said slowly. The girl nodded silently. Wait a minute. At this time, Miss Gamma suddenly called out to the two of them. She seemed to hesitate for a while. Finally, she opened another drawer and took out a fingernail-sized, chip-like thing. "What is this?" The senior schoolmate frowned. Miss Gamma said, "There are some things in it about both sexes. When I checked, I found that your bodies were complete. So, it will probably help you. Look boldly. It's not against the law now." Senior schoolmate, Yulia, subconsciously squeezed her thighs. "It's been checked? Too much." The girl looked down at the chip in her palm and followed behind senior schoolmate, Yulia. They seemed to be distracted. They were on their way back to their room. Senior schoolmate, Yulia, however, walked and stopped. She would stop for a while in a dim place and observe. "Don't look, it hasn't been played yet. Why are you in such a hurry?" The girl didn't pay attention and bumped into senior schoolmate, Yulia. She, who was pierced through, suddenly looked like Huang Wang and quickly put her hands behind her back. "It's not what you said, senior schoolmate. Want to rehearse something like that? Let's not talk about this." Senior schoolmate, Yulia, shook her head and suddenly whispered, "How much do you remember about the way back?" "What?" Remia looked up in shock. Senior schoolmate, Yulia, couldn't help but sigh. "It's over with the bronze. How should we play this game?" "I remember all of it." Remia suddenly whispered, "The way to go is different from the way back. I've basically memorized it." Senior schoolmate, Yulia, couldn't help but blink. "Good fellow. Also, there's one more thing." Remia moved closer and said in a low voice, "Just now at Miss Gamma's place, I didn't see Mr. Katz. It might still be outside." "Does Gamma know about the existence of cats?" "I don't know about that." Remia recalled what had happened and said slowly, "I didn't mention it on the way, only when everyone met. Mr. Chintaan seemed to have mentioned it. I don't know if Miss Gamma cares." "So, okay, I understand." With that, senior schoolmate, Yulia, grabbed Remia's wrist and strode forward. "Let's go." Senior schoolmate, "Where were we going?" "Back to the room." Senior schoolmate, Yulia, quickly said, "Prepare for the lesson. We have to be determined to be a qualified Sao. Mother body, for the sake of the continuation of humanity." Chapter 2188. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lying flat on the ground. Light music is floating slowly, and the air is filled with a soothing fragrance. Miss Gamma is working hard to teach the other two girls who shoulder the mission of human continuity how to help with the training of natural childbirth. Of course, she herself is also on the training list. Their daily life has become very simple and regular. First day, get up at 6:30, have breakfast, learn some parenting knowledge. Lunch at 12 o'clock, nap, and then midwifery training. Afternoon tea, continue training. Dinner at 6:30 in the evening, walk after dinner, continue to learn parenting knowledge. Watch a movie at 10 o'clock p.m., sleep. Day 2, watch a movie, sleep. Day 3, watch a movie, sleep. That's strange. I've arranged a healthy schedule, so why are your eyes still bloodshot? How can I sleep after watching a movie? Miss Gamma thought. Yes, but why don't I feel anything? Yulia, senior sister, was speechless. She has to wipe the nosebleed for Remia every night. Okay? Don't feel anything? Yulia, senior sister, felt that it was time for her to get angry. She immediately said angrily, "If you have the ability, you can watch it with us tonight. I'll teach you to be a new man." Good. Day 5, watch a movie, sleep. 10th. One day, Yulia, senior sister, suddenly slapped the table and got up, and with Remia, she carried out an escape plan. That night, the two were caught back. Watch a movie, sleep? What kind of weird training is today? She probably felt that she had struggled enough, and it was time to report back. Senior sister, Yulia, was different from her usual self today. She closed her eyes as if she had accepted her fate. Then, she lay down on the training ground and raised her butt. Yesterday, I practiced this posture for most of the day, and I almost have muscle memory. No separate training today. Miss Gamma was more serious. Today, we have a simulation training before the actual combat. It's too late to get up. Yulia, senior sister, lies directly on the ground, looks up, and subconsciously asks, "Actual combat model. What?" At this time, Miss Gamma clapped her hands, and the door of the trainer opened. Then, who was only wearing a short shirt and shorts, slowly walked in with no expression on his face. Go to Miss Gamma's side, then stay motionless. Z. The intelligence in the eyes of the past has faded, at this time, like an empty shell. Seems to have understood what the so-called actual combat simulation is all about. Yulia, senior sister, suddenly shivered. Her hands can't support directly to the ground, almost biting her tongue. Wait, so fast. I'm not ready yet. She suddenly cried out strangely. He seemed to be thinking very hard about the choice. Remia couldn't help trembling. Miss Gamma, what did you do to Mr. Z? Why does he look like? It seems a little strange. Nothing, just shut down some of his unnecessary emotional functions. Gamma said indifferently. Woke up too early. His behavior pattern is a little disordered. I just formatted him a little. Yulia, senior sister, was speechless at the moment. At this time, she slowly raised her hand, as if she had already made the first choice. Senior sister couldn't help swallowing subconsciously. Don't choose me. Remia nibbled her lips and pinched the corner of her clothes. What should I do? Miss Gamma looked on coldly until his finger finally pointed at her, and her face flashed an unnatural color. The air is solidifying. Miss Gamma took a serious look at and suddenly nodded. Choose me? I see. Then let's start. After that, Miss Gamma directly took off her white robe, then began to unbutton her collar, and said calmly, including me, I have told you the physical data of 3 people. It is reasonable to say that my physical data is the worst. Because my body is not suitable for immediate simulation, I guess you should choose the 2 of them, so I'm not ready yet. Yulia, senior sister, G can't think now. Remia's brain is blank. After Miss Gamma slightly untied her collar, she lifted her skirt and sat on the ground. With the voice of the eldest lady of the company, a box similar to a cleaning robot in the training ground moved quickly and walked out. She then looked at Z and said calmly, then, what the hell, this woman, playing seriously? Senior sister, Yulia, suddenly felt a chill in her heart and broke out in a cold sweat. At this time, Z slowly walked in front of Miss Gamma, knelt on one knee, and began to reach out and touch Miss Gamma's cheek. Wait a minute. Exclamations sounded in an instant. Senior sister, Yulia, braced herself and rushed forward, directly reaching out to push the 2 of them away. Miss Gamma frowned as if she was unhappy. Yulia, what's your problem? Yulia, senior sister Gamma's face was black. Without saying a word, she grabbed Gamma's arm and reversed it behind her. At the same time, she pinched Gamma's shoulder and clasped it. Miss Gamma obviously also knows self-defense fighting skills, and soon she has a counterattack. Although she was a SBHYNX in the dimensional void and didn't have a warrior's heart, senior sister, Yulia still had a lot of fighting skills and rich combat experience. Soon, she completely suppressed Miss Gamma, and by the way, she also took a few punches out of her heart. But what's more, the defense system of the training room has been activated. The drone turned out of the wall and quickly fired electric current at Yulia, senior sister, knocking her down to the ground, twitching. Miss Gamma covered her eyes at this time. Here, she finally ate a face-breaking punch, which was quite painful. The power of the electric shock suddenly increased a little. Yulia, senior sister Gamma screamed. After a thought flashed, she fainted directly. Miss Yi, I've tried my best. Even if something irresistible happens to me, I'm not willing. I really tried my best. Dizzy, senior sister. Remia hurriedly ran to Yulia, senior sister, and helped her up, only to see that senior sister fell in her arms and could not be shaken awake at all. She could not help but look at Miss Gamma in horror. Miss Gamma's face was cloudy and uncertain at this time. After a while, she slowly sighed and said, I was too anxious. I only cared about your physical state, but ignored your psychological state. About training, let's move back. Then, what about you, Leah's senior sister Gamma? Since you made a mistake, you should be punished. Miss Gamma said indifferently. Shut her up for 2 days and let her calm down. She should just not be able to bear the pressure. Remia, go back to your room first. Stop training for the next 2 days and relax. Take Remia back to her room and then come back to standby. Yes, nodded expressionlessly, then went to Remia and directly picked her up. In the silent corridor, slowly moving forward. This is indeed the way back to the room. Or you let me go first, I can go by myself. Remia hesitated at this time and said, I won't run away. He looked down at her and did not speak. Z, have you really forgotten me? Remia was slightly shocked. At this time, it was a completely strange feeling, cold and cold. Don't talk, Gamma is watching. Just when she was helpless, a slight voice sounded in Remia's ear. She subconsciously looked at, only to see his eyes move quickly from side to side a few times. Just as she was about to speak, she quickly pursed her lips and nodded slightly, as if she had understood something. After a while, Z spoke again. This time, his voice was not deliberately lowered, and it seemed normal. You can start talking. Gamma walked into the treatment room. Now he has no time to pay attention to us. Z, you're all right. Remia was surprised and happy. Z said, these days my mind has been very confused, and I just woke up not long ago. In order to not be discovered by Gamma, I can only maintain a state of obedience. With that, Z let go of Remia and put her down. Sorry, I didn't pay attention to your wishes just now. At this time, Remia suddenly grabbed his hand and quickly said, we will escape. You should be able to, right? Z asked back, as the only remaining human, are you going to give up the mission of continuing the human race's fire seed? Remia paused, then shook her head. I don't want to use this method. Z was silent for a moment before nodding. I will give you a passage map. While Gamma is in the treatment room, I will interfere with the internal network and give you time to leave. What about you? I can still leave. Z shook his head. Why? Sorry, I can't tell you now. Why? Remia asked subconsciously. Can't you leave with me? Z didn't say anything, just reached out his hand. Soon, a miniature drone flew out of the passage and landed on his palm. It will take you to leave this place through the shortest route. I suggest you don't hesitate too much because I don't know when Gamma will come out of the treatment room. This may be your only chance to leave in the near future. Remia opened her mouth and looked at the drone that was slowly rising again. She suddenly lowered her head. When she looked up again, she said faintly, before you discovered me for the first time, have you been observing for a while with the little blue bird? Yes. Is that so? So I've been a clown for so long. Remia laughed self-deprecatingly. Thank you. She suddenly closed her eyes and slowly sighed. When she opened her eyes again, she turned her head and started running as fast as she could. He watched the girl disappear at the end of the passage before he slowly squatted down and placed his palm on the floor. He muttered, Gaia. In the ruins of the city covered in gray snow, a blue bird was faintly discernible in the snow. It slowly descended and landed in front of a pile of snow. Z, Chintian, is calling you home to recharge your batteries. The pile of snow suddenly bulged, and a figure flipped out from the pile of snow. He was using a cloth to cover his body and hid in the pile of snow to observe the city. It's okay, I want to observe more. The person, Z, said slowly and raised the binoculars in his hand. What's so good about this human girl? The little blue bird landed on his shoulder. The bluebird's eyesight was surprisingly good, comparable to binoculars. Even without tools, it could see clearly. After all, it's the first time I met a human. There's no harm in observing more. The little blue bird said casually, I don't like this girl. Her companion was injured, but every time she went back, she would say that she didn't find any food and only brought back some water. See, isn't she secretly eating again? Clearly, according to your instructions, I've secretly placed food for two that is easy to find for her. He didn't say anything. He raised the binoculars and looked like an ice sculpture in the snow. At this time, at the end of a broken street in the ruined city, a thin and weak girl was holding an iron sword and pointing out of the alley while eating something quickly. The girl's gaze was like a hungry wolf. Chapter 2189. Run, run with all her might, following the mini drone that pointed to the exit. She believed that Z wouldn't lie to her about this. Z was such a person. No, such a half-human, half-machine guy. She actually hated him. It was like instinct. She wanted to escape. That pair of quick-witted eyes that were like clear water silently looked at those things that might be white, gray, or turbid in his eyes. It was like a clean mirror standing in front of him, reflecting his clown-like self in a simple and unadorned mirror. Pant, running with all her might, brought about rapid exhaustion of stamina, suffocating dizziness and nausea. She had to stop. It was already far away, and it should be close to the exit. Soon, the mini drone was also flying towards the bright exit. She crawled up from the ground and ran for her life again, but she had no choice but to stop in front of the exit. This was because she saw a familiar person here. Cats. After they followed Gamma into the experimental field, Cats, who had completely lost contact with it, actually appeared in front of her at this time. This was the exit of the experimental field, which was the platform of the experimental field they came from. Was it Cats who finally found this position? When she saw Cats, the armored man had obviously seen her and quickly walked in front of her. Since she had chosen to escape from that place and didn't even mention anyone in the team, she obviously didn't intend to have anything to do with them. At this moment, facing Cats, who was walking straight, Remia had a feeling that it was difficult to deal with. Z and the others seemed to be the type who cared about their companions quite a lot. They probably didn't like the behavior of abandoning their companions. Cats. Remia took the lead to call out the other party's name. Her face was surprised, happy, and anxious. Great, you're here. Z and everyone else are trapped inside. Quickly go and save them. The armored man had already arrived in front of Remia, but he didn't take any further action. Cats. Mister? After all, this was just a walking armor. It probably couldn't even be considered a living creature. However, Remia clearly felt that there was really a pair of eyes in the eye sockets of the armor mask that was sizing her up. So, you just casually gave up on those who helped you before? It wasn't Mr. Katz's voice. Remia's expression changed slightly. It wasn't Mr. Katz's voice. The voice seemed to be coming from behind Mr. Katz, and she seemed to have heard this voice somewhere before. Who? Who's there? Remia was shocked and hurriedly took 2 steps back. There was a chuckle, and then a figure slowly walked out from behind the armored man's huge body. Seeing this, Remia's eyes suddenly narrowed, and she exclaimed in disbelief, "You are Miss Wang." At this time, the person said slowly, "Let me give you a suggestion. If I were you, I wouldn't plan to leave this place." In the gloomy platform, something seemed to be moving. The repair is complete. It took 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 29 seconds. Miss Gamma wasn't very interested in this set of numbers. After carefully observing her broken eyes and confirming that they had been completely repaired, she turned off the intelligent medical program. In the process of treatment, she also narrowed her eyes slightly. At this time, her mental state was quite good. Turn on the monitor and search for the location of Remia and Yulia. In an instant, the position of the 3 groups of people appeared on the screen. Senior, Yulia, was lying in the confinement room, and it seemed that she had not yet woken up from the electric shock. But the current location of Z and Remia made Miss Gamma frown slightly. Remia is not in the room, but it is also a public area where activities are allowed. Instead, looking at the trajectory of Z on the screen, Miss Gamma quickly pressed a button and asked directly, "Z, where are you going?" The Z on the screen did not change, and there was no special expression on his face. He said slowly, "Patrol." "Patrol?" Gamma was a little surprised, but also nodded. But she shouldn't have given the order to patrol. Z's brain nerves are very complicated. His body structure is also very complicated. Z's body, to be precise, is a symbiotic body of human and machine that can grow naturally. Such a structure, even before the destruction of civilization, could not be achieved. But Z was born, and with it, there were also the seeds of these series, which all benefited from Gaia's godlike ability. "I'll be back soon." The voice of Z sounded again. "No, if you want to patrol, then continue to patrol." Miss Gamma shook her head and then bit her lips lightly, as if hesitating. After a while, she whispered, "After the patrol, come to my room and find me. Continue. Continue the previous simulation training. I will be ready this time." "Understood," Z replied calmly. Miss Gamma sighed slowly and cut off the communication. She sat in front of the console, and her good mental state seemed to become sluggish all of a sudden. "Bring up the map of the test site," Miss Gamma said again. On the screen, a map of the entire test site appeared and began to overlap with the position of Z at this time. Sure enough, it seems to be approaching intentionally or unintentionally. Miss Gamma muttered to herself. Is this some kind of instinct, or because of the relationship created by her power, so they are attracted to each other? I hope it's not. A moment later, Miss Gamma walked out of the treatment room. Before returning to her room to prepare for the simulation training, she had to go to the biological laboratory. Although she has been carrying out the necessary courses with Yulia and Remia during this period of time, she has not let go of other research. For example, the sexless Medanzo, such as Chintan, are obviously unreasonable creatures. As for the talking Taramaru and Bluebird, they are still acceptable. After all, they are originally creatures just thinking and talking, which could be seen as the evolution of creatures. If there is no gender, then what do you use to reproduce? Division? While thinking about the mystery of Medanzo's body, Miss Gamma went directly into the biological laboratory. But at this time, she frowned subconsciously. Because the container used to close Medanzo was empty at this time, Medanzo disappeared. Except for Medanzo, the rest are still there. Miss Gamma was shocked and instinctively wanted to withdraw from the laboratory. When she turned around, a small figure appeared in front of her. "Medanzo, are you awake?" "Yes, if you don't wake up, I'm afraid you're going to be cut into pieces for research. Aren't you?" "How did you get out?" This question is a little complicated. The young man in front of him showed a bright smile and gestured with his hands, probably flying from one place to another with a whoosh sound, and then flying back to this world from that place with a whoosh sound, something like that. Miss Gamma was unusually calm. She was about to speak. Unexpectedly, Medanzo suddenly took action. She took something and stuffed it directly into Gamma's mouth. "This place is probably voice-controlled." Medanzo smiled and quickly hit Gamma's stomach, making Gamma bend down in pain. "Then I can't let you talk for now." Gamma didn't expect that Medanzo, a short guy in his teens, would be so terrible skill. This guy's skill, as if he had been tempered 1,000 times, could completely suppress himself with a weak strength, until her hands were tied and her body was tied. Miss Gamma still had an unreal feeling. Medanzo was standing in front of Miss Gamma with a pipe in his mouth. He seemed to be thinking about something, sometimes frowning, sometimes fiddling with the console. It's hard to do. It seems that this place is not controlled by anyone except your voice. Medanzo sighed at this time. "That's the case, but for the sake of safety, I can't let you have a chance to speak. But in this way, I can't ask. There's a way." Then, under Gamma's incredible eyes, Medanzo picked up the chair directly and began to smash it down on the console. After a few hits in the face, sparks were flying on the console. Miss Gamma reacted and immediately showed a look of horror. She wanted to stop it, but she was trapped and couldn't move. The perfect way to lurk without being discovered is to kill all the people inside. It's the same. Medanzo squinted and laughed. "Smash it to pieces and lose control, and I can let you talk." "It's not the same, okay?" Miss Gamma stared angrily, but she could only make a whining sound. But Medanzo was obviously not satisfied with just smashing the console, and even began to connect the cables in the room. Until the sound of buzzing suddenly sounded, and the whole experiment field suddenly lit up with a red light of music warning. The screen on the console flashed wildly, chaotic, as if it was poisoned. Medanzo was satisfied and pulled out the cloth ball used to plug Gamma's mouth. "That should be about it." "You're crazy," Medanzo said coldly. "This base-like place also uses eternal power, right?" Miss Gamma suddenly looked stunned. Medanzo said calmly, "It seems to be, but it's not hard to guess. After all, the world has been abandoned for countless years. but it can still function normally. Ordinary energy probably can't last until now. Tell me, where is eternal power? I mean, Gaia. I don't know. It doesn't matter if you don't know. Madanzo shrugged. There will always be someone who knows, for example. Z, how can you? Miss Gamma finally couldn't keep calm and was a little lost. How do you know that? Madanzo shook his head. In fact, it's also a guess. However, Z will definitely find Gaia, which is probably the fate that the world needs. Let me go. You can't let it. Madanzo pressed several places on Gamma's neck with her fingers at the same time, which made her suddenly faint. Absolutely not. That is to say, capital can. Madanzo chuckled. I'm also a little destroyer. After thinking for a while, Metatro casually released Fairski and the others who were imprisoned inside before he left. However, they were still unconscious. Madanzo didn't plan to wake up, so he just left it. The ear-piercing buzzing sound did not stop. The door of the confinement room seemed to be convulsing as it kept opening, closing, opening, and closing. The confinement room was dark red, but senior sister, Yulia, was still lying on the bed, not moving at all. Then, a short and small figure appeared in front of her. If you don't get up, I'll block the door. You'll suffocate to death here. Senior sister, Yulia, who was lying on the bed, instantly opened her eyes, and her face was filled with surprise. Senior, are you here to save me? Don't pretend, Madanzo said angrily. But speaking of which, you can really pretend to be dead. The door is obviously open. Although it's a little convulsive, you can still hold it and don't move. I just want to lie down in this page world. Although this damn place isn't a high-energy, dangerous world, there are fatal dangers everywhere. The sword that will come from Miss Maid and is called, "You're going to die, Lady Nan," is hanging above my head all the time. Senior, what should we do now? She could only pretend that she didn't hear Madanzo's mockery and asked seriously. Madanzo didn't tease her anymore. She thought for a while and said, "The Book of Gaia is beginning to react, and it should be entering the key point. Also, Morgan seems to have appeared." Yulia was slightly shocked. Where is she? It's just the reaction of the other half of the book in my hand. Madanzo shrugged. But since we have the other half of the book in our hands, Morgan is probably the same in this world. Everyone is on the same starting line, and it's 2 against 1. If we meet, we won't be afraid at all. Okay, senior sister, Yulia, quickly nodded and said, "Senior, I will wave the flag for you with all my might when the time comes. Shout." Madanzo glanced at Yulia and suddenly asked curiously, "Newbies, don't tell me they're all trash like you." Yulia said awkwardly, Senior, why don't you ask the boss yourself? There's a chance." Madanzo didn't say anything and then said directly, "Come, let's go find the female protagonist." There was still an ear-piercing buzzing sound. In the tunnel, he looked around, suddenly squatted down, and then punched the metal floor. One punch after another, the floor began to sink and change shape. Finally, the entire floor fell off, and Z immediately fell to the lower level. Chapter 2190. On the way, Madanzo briefly explained his experience of escaping. It was a very simple way through the Book of Gaia to another page world and then back again. Between going and going back, with a little mistake, he successfully escaped from the imprisonment. You should have done this earlier, Senpai. Well, something happened, so it was a little delayed. Let's deal with the things here first. Madanzo suddenly stopped at this time because at this time there was a violent sound, like the sound of some kind of explosion. Yulia suddenly had an ominous premonition and subconsciously said, "Senpai, what else did you do?" Madanzo quickly went through the lines he connected in the control room. At this time, he shook his head with a sincere face. "No, I just simply escaped. Lyings go to hell. I'm afraid you want to go to hell anyway." Yulia squinted her eyes, and she also shook her head. "I don't know what Kerrigan will do. Since she's already here, maybe it's her." "It must be." The angelic boy had a look of certainty. Yulia, at this time, pulled Madanzo's hand, pulled him into a passage, and said directly, go this way. During this time, Gamma has been giving me and Remia free space to move freely. Yulia said, the environment here is roughly known. Those areas where we can move freely naturally will not have any secrets. Now, this is the area that was previously forbidden to enter. Just right now, we can explore it. She was awakened by the shrill sound of the alarm. After waking up, the whole world seemed to be a mess. Looking at the dark red flashing control room, Gamma went from shock to anger in just a short second. She quickly got up and ran to the console to see if there was any way to save it. However, the result was obviously very bad. She couldn't even summon the center of the experiment field, which meant that she had almost zero control over the experiment field. In the inner room, several glass cabins had been broken. Other than Madanzo, the other 3 Chintian had fallen to the ground, or rather, they were lying in a pool of blood. That is, suddenly, Miss Gamma's face changed again, because she found that in addition to the 3 strange creatures, there was another person she was familiar with, who also fell into a pool of blood. Remia. He was one of the few survivors of the human race. The mission of human continuity forced Miss Gamma to rush to the side of Remia without much thought. She could not let any human being disappear in front of her eyes. As for why Remia was here, it was no longer within the scope of consideration. Remia, how are you? In a panic, Miss Gamma lifted Remia up and held her in her arms. The girl's clothes were stained with blood, and she could not wake up no matter how she shook. Wait, I'll take you to the treatment room right away. I won't let you die. Miss Gamma gritted her teeth, put Remia's arm on her shoulder, and lifted Remia up. At this moment, a piercing pain came, almost making her brain blank. Remy, yeah? I'm sorry, Miss Gamma. How did you? She fell to push, and she was pushed to the ground by Remia, who had suddenly woken up. At the same time, there was a sharp piece of glass in Miss Gamma's abdomen. She looked at the girl in front of her in disbelief, as if she could not understand why the other party's eyes could be so cold. I can't go back. At this time, the girl stabbed something again, once on Miss Gamma's abdomen. She put her arms around Miss Gamma's neck and stabbed her again and again with no expression on her face. She stood up, silently watching the pool of blood under Gamma begin to expand, watching Gamma's body twitch and then turn away. He looked around the environment, and all around, it was a scenery he had never seen before. It was as if he had entered another world, a world like a courtyard. Z raised his head. In the azure sky, there was an irregular hole. It was the place where he fell, or rather, the place where he broke through. The sky was not as high as he had imagined. It was just a simulation of the sky. In the courtyard, the shade was green, the flowers were like brocade, and even the breeze was completely different from the gentleness of the outside world. This was a spring-like beauty that only existed in the past history of human beings that he had collected. Z lingered in this scenery that he had never seen before, and gradually became absent-minded. Unknowingly, he had already gone deep into this place. On the way, saw some interesting things. Many strange creatures. These creatures were like specimens, placed in cylindrical containers. They grew on the grass, and the base was even covered with moss. Some of them were even directly covered by plants, and they needed to be pulled apart to be seen clearly. Creatures like monsters, or it would be more appropriate to call them specimens. There was a white guy that looked like a tiger, but was much bigger than a tiger. There was also a strange guy that was like a snake, but had 4 limbs and 5 claws, 2 horns on the head, and was completely golden. Z even saw a strange black substance like fog. He even saw a 4-meter-tall blue giant. Under the base of the container containing the strange creature specimens, there seemed to be a code. He wanted to see more carefully, so he squatted down in front of the blue giant's container base and reached out to touch the moss on the base. But at this moment, Z seemed to feel something. His eyes focused, and his body nimbly turned over and jumped back. In the forest, a man in a silver robe appeared out of nowhere. The man was slender, and his long hair hung down to his waist. It was a rare silver-white hair. He was smiling at Z. He didn't feel any sense of danger from such a smile. Z couldn't help but frown and ask subconsciously, You can call me Central. The man smiled again and walked slowly. Or you can call me Cicero. Z took a step back, but his body didn't relax. You are Gamma's father? Sorry, I'm not. The man shook his head. I'm just set to look like Dr. Cicero. Of course, because the doctor used himself as the model to create me, we're basically similar in some aspects. For example, this appearance. Of course, if you don't like it, I can change into another appearance. It's very simple. After all, I'm just a projection talking to you. Do you have any special requirements? For example, a beautiful girl with long legs, or a young widow whose husband has just died. That's it. A male is good. Z shook his head. Besides, this guy was a little talkative, probably because he hadn't spoken for a long time. He suddenly had a feeling. He looked around again and muttered, Where is this place? One of Dr. Cicero's most important experimental sites. Cicero, in front of him, said slowly, It's also one of his earliest laboratories. Here, there are many inspirations of the doctor. The specimens you see now are also one of his inspirations. Of course, they're just conceptual prototypes, embryonic forms, and there's still a long way to go before they are born. I'm here to find someone, he said suddenly. I know, Cicero nodded. The person you are looking for is Miss Gaia, right? Where's she? Z asked without hesitation. I can take you to Miss Gaia. Cicero's expression was calm, but he said, But before that, you need to answer me a question. Why are you looking for Miss Gaia? I don't know. Z shook his head directly. I just feel that I need to find her. I see. Cicero looked thoughtful. He didn't say anything else, just turned around and walked further inside silently. He didn't ask to follow, but he didn't ask him not to follow either. Z walked a few steps faster and caught up with Cicero's footsteps. He was about to speak. At this moment, Cicero suddenly asked, Do you know what your name is? Cicero shook his head. What I'm talking about is your original name, not your name after you've been modified. Also, how much do you remember about the past? I don't remember. Z shook his head. Do you want to know? Cicero suddenly blinked his eyes. Z nodded. I'm not telling you. Cicero's face showed a faint smile. His personality seemed to be a little bad. The creator, the real Dr. Cicero, probably had such a personality. Z wasn't angry, just nodded and said simply, Okay. Boring. Cicero suddenly sighed. I just want to say more. I can't tell you my name. Even I don't know why I can't tell you. Your name seems to be like a taboo that can't be mentioned. Why? He couldn't help but frown. I already said that I don't know. Cicero shook his head again. But I can tell you about your predecessor before you were modified. You're the last human male who still has the ability to reproduce. Z said indifferently, Gamma has already told me. You are the heir of the last empire of humans, the infinite sun of stars, the original source of all things. Speak human language. That's official language. Z shook his head. There's more. Cicero asked curiously, Why, you don't seem to feel anything about this identity that once stood at the top of billions of creatures. Are you not interested? Z said very seriously, The humans outside are almost extinct. I'm not standing at the top of billions of monsters now. Instead, I have to avoid their hunting. Cicero showed a distressed expression and suddenly said, Here, I have a sentence that my master once said. It seems to be about you in the past. Z seemed to be willing to listen. Cicero cleared his throat, and his eyes suddenly became hazy. As long as your highness is willing, all things will probably shine with their original brilliance again. After saying that, he looked at. His gaze didn't seem to be the original him, but another one, the one who created it. Time and space seemed to be misplaced. At the end of time, someone was silently looking at Z. Are you willing? Cicero finally stared into his eyes and asked softly, Willing what? Z frowned after a while. At this moment, Cicero's eyes gradually revealed a puzzled expression, and he asked in confusion, What did I say just now? You don't remember? Cicero shook his head and said thoughtfully, I'm just a consciousness created by my master to manage this courtyard. Maybe I really said something just now, but could also be set by my master. It can only be triggered under certain conditions. It's not strange that I don't know. After all, my master's personality is quite bad. Z pondered for a while and repeated the two sentences that Cicero said. All things d'original brilliance? Cicero frowned. Did I really say that? What do these words mean? Sorry, I can't interpret it myself. Cicero shook his head. Maybe you can remember it and understand it in the future. Z thought for a while and said, Where is Gaia? Miss Gaia is already by your side. Cicero said something that had no clear meaning at this moment. Z showed a confused expression. Cicero said, The entire courtyard here is Miss Gaia. You should know that Miss Gaia has a godlike ability. She was able to materialize her imagination through her thoughts. And this courtyard is the last thing that Miss Gaia materialized. After that, Miss Gaia disappeared from this courtyard. Z frowned. You just said that this is one of the most important laboratories of Dr. Cicero, who created you. How did it become Gaia's materialized courtyard? It's very contradictory, right? Cicero smiled and said, But in fact, it's true, because Miss Gaia turned the laboratory into the courtyard today. The ecosystem here is complete, and even without any energy supply, the courtyard can continue to exist until forever. Z was secretly shocked and said thoughtfully, Eternal power? Chapter 2191. In the courtyard, Cicero didn't respond to his words directly. Instead, he waved his hand forward. In the fairyland-like courtyard, a pavilion suddenly appeared from the ground. This was some kind of image, but it was a reality. Z subconsciously reached out to touch it, but his palm went straight through it. In the pavilion, there was a girl sitting in a wheelchair. The girl's hair was also silver gray, but it was dim and lusterless. It was more like it was dried up. This is... Z subconsciously approached the girl in the wheelchair and looked at her face. However, the girl's eyes were also lusterless. Gaia. Cicero came to his side and said slowly, To be precise, it's Gaia on the eve of the destruction. At this time, Gaia's physical condition was very bad, and she was unconscious most of the time. But even so, she would ask to do one thing in the only time she was awake every day. What? Waiting for a person, Cicero said softly. He's here. Z frowned when he heard that. He seemed to sense something beside him. He turned around and saw a young man running over quickly. The young man was even holding a book in his arms. He passed through Z's body and arrived in front of the girl in the wheelchair. The originally lifeless girl suddenly bloomed like an epiphyllum flower. The girl's face instantly had a touch of color. Even though this was just an image, the entire courtyard seemed to glow with a different kind of vitality because of the appearance of this smile. The most primitive feeling of being alive gradually filled the air. The young man intimately stroked the girl's head and whispered something in her ear. Then he sat on the ground, opened the book in his hand, and began to read the contents of the book. For Miss Gaia, to be able to wait for his arrival every day and hear him talk about something by himself is already her most precious and luxurious request. Cicero, his voice was like the sound of an old bell tower. On the eve of the destruction, she gave all her waking time to this young man. He is... Z said with a trembling voice. Me? The pavilion in front of him suddenly dispersed like smoke and then gathered again. On the grass in the courtyard, another scene appeared at this moment. It was still the young man who was holding a book, and the other person was a silver-haired man who looked like Cicero. No, perhaps this was the real Professor Cicero, because he looked more mature. You want to stop developing eternal motive power? Why? If this continues, Gaia will die. The entire world is also facing destruction. The silver-haired man gently shook his head. Your Highness, as the successor of the Empire, I hope you can understand. Could it be that the burden of the entire world must be placed on her shoulders, and we can only be like vampires, sucking her life out of her in order to survive? It's not that the burden of the world has been placed on her shoulders. It's simply that fate has chosen her. She possesses such an ability. The silver-haired man whispered again, and the sad thing is, as humans, we have no way to separate her from this ability. Uncle Cicero, I beg you, it's useless. The man shook his head again. This is His Majesty's order. No one can disobey His Majesty's order. The young man angrily said, there is no such thing as eternal motive power. Everything is just a lie. Your research has no progress at all. I know that you and Father made up a lie to deceive the entire world. The silver-haired man sighed and said, it's precisely because this is a lie that we need to continue lying. When necessary, even if we know it's a lie, we can only force ourselves to believe it. Ridiculous. The young man roared, Cicero, as the successor of the empire, I order you to immediately stop extracting Gaia's bone marrow, stop researching eternal motive power, and announce the truth to the public. Forgive me for not obeying, Your Highness. I'm the crown prince of the empire. I am a future emperor. But you're not the emperor now. There will be a day. Wait until the day you can have that day. The silver-haired man looked at the weak young man in front of him and said solemnly, if I can wait until the day you become the emperor, you must become the emperor of the empire. You must become the emperor of the empire. The sound seemed to be still lingering in his ears. However, the scene in front of Z changed again into the clouds and mist. It was still the young man, and the other one was Miss Gamma. The young man seemed to have matured a little, the maturity in his expression. At this time, they were standing on a high platform, looking at something. Miss Gamma said, Your Highness, the time Gaia can wake up is getting less and less these days. She shouldn't be able to wake up today. Why don't you go back first? Where else can I go back? The young man smiled bitterly. Go back to that cold palace. Do you know what the servants in the palace said? As long as it's close to His Majesty, it's like accidentally falling into an extremely low cold, making people shudder. After all, His Majesty has too many things to worry about. I know everything. The young man shook his head, but I'm not the emperor yet. Your Highness. Suddenly, the young man reached out and grabbed Miss Gamma's palm, pulling Miss Gamma directly into his arms. The young man was like a ferocious beast, invading this mature body, until Miss Gamma bit the young man's lips and pushed him away forcefully. She raised her palm and was about to slap the young man. However, she raised her palm halfway, but in the end, she couldn't hit him. Fight! Otherwise, you may not even have a chance to fight in the future. The young man said faintly, In any case, in the eyes of my father, I am just a tool for mating. From tomorrow onwards, there will be a large number of women sent to me. You seem to be on the list, Sister Gamma. Gamma only clenched the torn collar, and the half-raised palm finally caressed the young man's face. Now, can you feel a little bit of the weight on Gaia's body? She shoulders the illusory future of humanity, and you carry the continuation of the fire of humanity. Aren't you the same? Gamma, don't just have Gaia in your eyes. Gamma lowered her head. There are also many people waiting for you in silence. With that, she turned around and left. If it's going to start tomorrow, I hope that the first one you can choose is me. At that time, I won't resist. The smoke changed again, starting from Miss Gamma, who was far away. Looking at Miss Gamma's gradually disappearing figure, S' expression changed a little. He hesitated and asked, This kind of emotion in human books seems to be described as, like, human books? Cicero looked at it in surprise and nodded. It seems that waking up after a long wait has made you lose a lot of things. Of course, I don't have the right to criticize you. After all, compared to you, I'm the one with a pure rational structure. Z shook his head. Not only could he not agree, he could not understand. At this time, Cicero said, About Miss Gamma, in my memory, her feelings for His Highness may be stronger than like. Why? It's probably because she was instilled with the idea of becoming the Empire's heir and spouse since she was young. She has been working hard for this goal. Z was silent for a moment, then slowly said, What else do you want to show me? Don't worry. Cicero smiled at this time. There's a lot of time. I still have some follow-up to tomorrow. It's restricted. Do you want to see it? It's guaranteed to be exciting. Z looked at Cicero in front of him expressionlessly. Tomorrow, actually, nothing happened. How do you know? Cicero couldn't help but show a surprised expression. Z said indifferently, from my observation of Gamma, she has no experience in mating. Recently, she has been learning about it. This is enough to prove that it has never happened before. Also, mating is for the continuation of the human race, but the outside world still perished. In other words, it didn't change the fact that the human race was destroyed, or rather, before it could be carried out, the destruction had already arrived. Finally, is the real Dr. Cicero's personality also so bad? Probably when I was creating, there was some artistic processing. Cicero smiled slightly. That's right. Tomorrow indeed didn't come. The destruction came earlier than anyone had expected, and everyone was caught off guard. The destruction of the entire world happened in a single night. A fatal substance began to appear in the air. People would die within a short minute after inhaling it. Even if they were a breathing machine, the various catastrophes that followed forced the human race to the point where they could no longer survive. Then me, Cicero waved his hand again, and the dispersed fog condensed again. Z saw Dr. Cicero again. Compared to before, the youth looked much more haggard. Your Highness, have you really decided? You have to know that unless you can awaken Gaia again in the distant future, all of this will become irreversible. The silver-haired man sighed and said, You may have to bear the loneliness and despair of the entire world. Loneliness may devour you. Let's begin. The youth said directly, At least in the distant future, I still have hope to see her again. And he looked at the youth as if he could see the youth's true thoughts. The youth didn't seem to disappoint him. He said softly, Uncle Cicero, you said that even if the world was destroyed and turned into nothingness, Gaia would still exist. Her consciousness would still exist. But if the world is gone, I won't be there, right? This was the only method I could think of that would allow me to accompany her in the worst-case scenario. Even if what awaited me was an unknown amount of time of deep sleep, an unknown amount of loneliness. Also, aren't you also planning this? The survivor plan. I can agree, probably because you and Father want to see it. The glory of the Empire is with you. The silver-haired man suddenly knelt in front of the youth and said loudly, The glory of civilization is also with you. My Highness, this is the reason why you exist. When the fog dispersed, Cicero said slowly, Of course, after you were transformed, His Majesty ordered again to create many biochemical transformations of this series with you as the prototype. However, the transformations didn't survive the erosion of the world, and only you can exist in the end. I think this is probably partly because of Gaia's will. What's wrong with you? Z asked coldly. Me? Cicero was startled, and then he looked at himself. His body was slightly distorted. The projected body started to become unstable. Suddenly, Cicero raised his head. At this moment, a hole suddenly appeared in the sky of the courtyard, and then a big shadow fell from above. Boom! The sound of the falling object was unusually loud. It was obvious that the object that fell was heavy. Z's eyes narrowed, and then he ran directly to the place where the object fell. His dynamic vision was enough for him to capture the entire appearance of the object. It was cats. On the ground, there was a deep pit that was several meters deep. Only Cats, who was covered in iron armor, could get up easily without any damage after falling and creating such a big pit. When he arrived at the scene, Cats, the armored man, was cleaning the mud on his body. Cats? Z walked to Cats' side in surprise. How did you find this place? That day, I went back to the square of the station and didn't see you, so I waited here. Cats said quickly, but I waited for a long time, and I didn't see you, so I could only look around. Then I saw the mark that Qingtian left on the road, and I found this place. I don't know why this place is like a maze, and I fell down while walking. Z showed a smile and reached out his hand to pat away the mud that Cats couldn't reach. He said softly, It's so good to see you again. Yeah, Katz exclaimed. I thought I would never see you again. Be careful. A shout suddenly sounded. It was Cicero, his voice, and his projection instantly appeared on the side. Z was stunned, and he lowered his head. His body, his abdominal cavity, had been pierced through by Katz's hand. Katz? So, why did you let me see you? The armored man's voice suddenly became sharp. It seemed to be a woman's voice.